Chapter 421, Alienated Father-Son Relationship. After Ludwig departed, Tang Mi entered the room. "Goyle and Crabbe's men wish to see you," she announced. "They're here on behalf of their foolish sons," John replied, his voice calm as he perused the list before him. His gaze eventually settled on Rozier's name. Tang Mi shrugged, adding, "During the last war against the Ministry of Magic, 2 of their members were imprisoned in Azkaban. In return, they're offering a portion of their property in Diagon Alley," she continued. The decline of pureblood families was a well-known trend. Despite their efforts to maintain blood purity through intermarriage, their numbers continued to dwindle. These ancient families, holding sway over numerous magical industries, sought to preserve their status through monopolization. Yet, their focus remained on their progeny. John met with the heads of the 2 pureblood families, and, following their discussions, he acquired stakes in both a cauldron shop and a literary establishment. As part of the agreement, John pledged to advocate on their behalf to the Ministry of Magic, aiming to commute the sentences of the 2 imprisoned Death Eaters from life to a fixed term. The family heads expressed their gratitude profusely. John beckoned them closer. As they approached, he placed his hands on their shoulders, compelling the taller man to stoop. "My assistance is for a friend. Such opportunities are rare. I expect your kin to abandon any foolish notions of allegiance to another. Remember, even in our world, there are means to enforce justice," he warned, his tone stern. The men, their backs slick with cold sweat, nodded vigorously, understanding the gravity of John's message. They agreed that, if necessary, they would confine their own to ensure the cultivation of future generations. After a firm pat on their shoulders, John dismissed the visibly shaken men. Subsequently, several other families, whose members were also imprisoned in Azkaban, sought John's help. He selectively assisted those who had gambled on Voldemort's victory, viewing their allegiance as a speculative investment. With Voldemort's defeat, these individuals were filled with regret. As John was sorting through the items brought by these families, Tang Mi announced the arrival of Minister Crouch, who brought with him a plainly packaged box. "Old Barty, would you like me to summon little Barty?" John inquired, sensing the elder's desire to see his son. "No, there's no need," Barty Sr. replied, clearly uncomfortable at the prospect of facing his son. He placed the box down, frowning. "Amelia's recent parliamentary attack on your enterprises has disrupted societal operations," he lamented. John spread his hands in a gesture of helplessness. "My friend, would you feel differently if you knew the person behind the mask?" he asked, hinting at his own identity. Barty Sr., aware of John's remarkable achievements at such a young age, felt that by the time John assumed full control, he himself might have retired. He explained his absence from certain events, citing the inappropriateness of a minister associating too closely with certain individuals. "That's understandable," John replied, snapping his fingers. A gold-rimmed crystal glass materialized on the table. He rose, retrieved a bottle adorned with golden stars from the wine cabinet, and smiled. "This is from my private collection." Upon opening the bottle, its refreshing and mellow aroma filled the room, earning Barty's praise. Such a delight is rare to find. After pouring the wine, Barty savored a sip, marveling at the magical essence it conveyed. John, returning to his seat, offered to send a bottle with Barty, who declined, wary of appearing overly indulgent. As they conversed over the wine, John steered the discussion towards the punishment of several Death Eaters. Barty's expression turned to a frown, his displeasure evident. "I don't remember you," he began, leaving his sentence unfinished as he grappled with the complexities of their situation. John, always keenly aware of the political undercurrents within the wizarding world, understood the risks of meddling with the Minister of Magic's authority. Thus, he approached the topic with tact, acknowledging the concerns brought to him by several influential families. They wondered if Johnny Silverhand, a name John had adopted, possessed significant power. Old Barty, with a chuckle that held layers of meaning, questioned the relevance of this inquiry. John, however, shifted the conversation to a seemingly unrelated topic. "Have you ever heard of a Muggle amusement park?" Old Barty, despite his deep immersion in the magical world, was well versed in over 200 languages and had a broad understanding of Muggle culture, including amusement parks. John seized this moment to unveil his ambitious vision. "I want to build not just an amusement park, but an entire entertainment city." With a snap of his fingers, John summoned dozens of parchments from a bookshelf, which floated before old Barty. As Barty perused the documents, his expressions fluctuated between concern and intrigue, eventually settling into a thoughtful and somewhat pleased demeanor. John, sensing the shift in atmosphere, elaborated on the benefits of his plan, emphasizing the potential for increased magical trade taxation and the boost to local tourism. He reassured old Barty that the Silver Hand Fashion Building would spearhead this venture in collaboration with the Ministry of Magic, requiring only a piece of land from the ministry's side. The funding, John revealed with a confident smile, had already been arranged on behalf of the ministry. Old Barty's reaction was a complex mix of emotions. The magical society, traditionally conservative and resistant to change, had long relied on outdated practices, such as the system of ransom money to mitigate legal consequences. However, Barty had been a force of reform since his appointment, challenging these old norms. John's proposal, tempting as it was, threatened to reintroduce controversial practices under a new guise. After a moment of contemplation, John suggested a compromise, leveraging the deeds of certain individuals who had acted against Voldemort at Hogwarts, thereby offsetting their past crimes. This proposition, which would significantly reduce their sentences, was a testament to John's influence and negotiation skills. Old Barty, acknowledging the gesture, agreed to a 2-year sentence for these individuals, a decision made in consideration of John's involvement. As Old Barty departed with the Entertainment City project in hand, John reflected on the complex dynamics of power and redemption within the wizarding world. Meanwhile, at Grimmauld Place, the atmosphere was starkly different. Sirius, Harry's godfather, displayed a mix of affection and concern for his godson and friends. Despite the grim news of Voldemort's activities abroad, the reunion was a moment of warmth and solidarity. Kreacher's mistreatment and the strained dynamics within the Black family highlighted the ongoing struggles and the resilience of those fighting against the darkness. This narrative, weaving together themes of ambition, redemption, and the enduring bonds of friendship and family, sets the stage for a complex exploration of power, loyalty, and the quest for a better future in the wizarding world. Harry always had a sense that he was destined for adventure, a notion that would surely irritate Mrs. Weasley if she heard it. He glanced towards the door, behind which Dumbledore, Lupin, and their associates were gathered. "I need to head to a meeting," Sirius announced as he entered and closed the door behind him. Ron looked puzzled. "Did I just see Mundungus?" he asked. "That's odd. He's a member of the Order of the Phoenix," Harry remarked, somewhat perplexed. "I thought they were going to kick him out after he was caught stealing last time," Ron commented, his tone laced with disdain. "He's drowning in debt. He used to flaunt his gold teeth, but now they've been pulled out and sold." Hermione, however, was unfazed by Mundungus's financial woes. Her concern lay elsewhere. "Harry, Ron, let's go check on Kreacher," she suggested, her voice filled with a sense of duty towards the house elf welfare. Knowing Hermione's compassion for house elves, Harry and Ron reluctantly agreed to accompany her. Upon entering the kitchen, they found no sign of Kreacher. After calling out his name twice, they finally spotted him emerging from beneath the stove. The sight of such a dismal living condition deeply moved Hermione. Harry, on the other hand, was less inclined to engage with Kreacher, finding the elf's remarks often distasteful. However, as he glanced around the cramped space under the stove, his eyes landed on a box that stirred a sense of familiarity within him. Chapter 422, The Stolen History of Mundungus and the Order of the Phoenix. Moody, tapping his wooden leg on the floor, broke the silence. "Voldemort may have lost the support of the Death Eaters," he began, "but we're all aware of his ambitions. He'll undoubtedly seek out new allies." "Werewolves, giants, banshees," he listed, pausing for effect, "or perhaps even new followers." Despite his retirement, Moody's understanding of Voldemort remained unparalleled. Lupin added, "Voldemort suffered a significant setback at the Ministry of Magic. He came perilously close to death." "Yes, we're all aware of that, Moony," Sirius interjected, his tone laced with irritation. The memory was a bitter one, and he preferred not to dwell on it. "But the fact remains, he's still at large, and we can't afford to let our guard down. Tonks, with a grave expression, noted, "The Weasley's magical clock perpetually points to mortal danger. It's a constant reminder that our lives hang in the balance." "The Ministry of Magic hasn't ceased their search either," she continued. "The new headmaster of Hogwarts, Professor Slughorn, has even requested Auror protection for the school." "He's well aware of the danger Voldemort poses," Lupin added solemnly. "With the Death Eaters scattered, Voldemort's capacity for widespread evil may be diminished, but that only makes him more dangerous. A Dark Lord without constraints is a terrifying prospect." Kingsley, his dark skin stark against the dim lighting, turned to Dumbledore. "There's troubling news. A rumor has spread that something capable of granting any wish is hidden within Hogwarts. We can't rule out the possibility of Voldemort's sympathizers among the pure bloods. This rumor does us no favors," he concluded. "The Holy Grail," Sirius muttered, almost to himself. "Can it truly grant any wish?" "I would think so, unless you're blinded by skepticism," came Snape's familiar sardonic tone, which immediately darkened Sirius's mood. Snape, seated at Dumbledore's right, spoke in a drawn-out tone. "You've seen it yourself, an old man rejuvenated." "Really, Snape? I doubt you saw much, considering you spent the Ministry battle cowering in the school with your cauldrons," Sirius retorted with biting sarcasm. Snape's gaze turned icy. "You dare question my competence, Sirius Black, the dog with broken ribs." The tension between them was palpable, causing Tonks to shift uncomfortably. Dumbledore intervened. "You're mistaken, Sirius." His tone suggested he was siding with Snape, but his next words clarified his stance. "John did indeed die once." "Impossible, we all know." Kingsley started to object. "Magic cannot revive the dead. Yes, we're all aware," Dumbledore continued calmly. "Yet he did. Sirius encountered him in the Hall of Death, an archway that leads to realms unknown." "Is he akin to that mysterious man?" Tonks asked, her voice dropping as a chill settled over the room. They all understood the implication. The only person in recent history with a similar experience was Voldemort, who, after losing his body in Godric's Hollow, existed as a disembodied spirit for over a decade before being reborn. Dumbledore swiftly changed the subject, turning to Kingsley. "What's the international response to the other man?" "It's dire," Kingsley replied, shaking his head. "Magical governments worldwide are calling for accountability, citing a failure of oversight." "Who would have thought he'd leave that place?" Dumbledore mused, his eyes reflecting a hint of disappointment. He was referring to Grindelwald, whose last known location was the same as Voldemort's, Germany. "We've been unable to pinpoint his whereabouts," Kingsley said gravely. "I'll reach out to some old acquaintances," Dumbledore declared, undeterred. His network spanned the globe, from the esteemed Nicholas Flamel to the likes of Mundungus Fletcher, a thief. Even abroad, Dumbledore's connections ran deep. This meeting underscored the gravity of their situation. With Voldemort seeking new allies and dangerous artifacts rumored to be hidden within Hogwarts, the Order of the Phoenix faced challenges on multiple fronts. Yet, under Dumbledore's guidance, they remained united, ready to confront whatever threats lay ahead. The defense of Hogwarts had concluded, and Tonks was appointed by the Ministry of Magic to bolster the school's defenses. The Order of the Phoenix remained vigilant, aware that Voldemort's retaliation could come at any moment. As the meeting ended, Kingsley and Tonks departed. Sirius approached Dumbledore, concern etched on his face. "He started again," he said, his voice heavy with frustration. Dumbledore's gaze shifted to Mundungus Fletcher, who was lurking in a corner. Remus Lupin joined them, his expression one of resignation. "He was rummaging through Creature's belongings in the kitchen this morning, intending to sell them," Lupin explained. "This isn't the first time," Sirius added, his anger barely contained. "I'll speak with him," Dumbledore assured, summoning Mundungus. Mundungus's appearance was peculiar, to say the least. His head was half bald, his face a patchwork of black and white, and his teeth seemed to be in a constant state of falling out and regrowing. As he approached, he lost another tooth. "Mundungus, what drives you to steal from the Black family?" Dumbledore inquired, his tone patient yet firm. Mundungus, missing a tooth, pleaded, "I must pay my debts or I'll go mad." He revealed that he had been subjected to various experimental products, spending much of his time at Silver Cross Hospital. The experiments had left him with abnormal skin coloration, teeth that would fall out, and a possibly compromised mental state due to the effects of a daydream curse. His latest theft attempt involved an item Creature had hidden, but Sirius caught him in the act. Before Dumbledore could respond, Harry rushed over, a golden locket in hand, followed closely by Hermione and Ron. "Sirius, what is this?" Harry asked, breathless. Sirius glanced at the locket. "Just a piece of junk from Creature's pile, I suppose." "Yes, but where did it come from?" Harry pressed. "I'm not sure," Sirius admitted. "The Black House is full of oddities Creature might have collected." Dumbledore, noticing the locket, asked Harry to hand it over. Upon inspection, he said, "If I'm not mistaken, this is Salazar Slytherin's locket." Harry was stunned. Slytherin's? Why would it be here? A realization struck Sirius. Mundungus attempted to steal this locket this morning. He confronted Mundungus, demanding to know his intentions. Mundungus, visibly shaken, insisted he was only trying to settle his debts. Dumbledore intervened, placing a calming hand on Mundungus's shoulder. "Who instructed you to do this?" he asked, his voice carrying an edge of authority. Mundungus confessed, "I was in debt, and Tommy Shelby told me to use these valuable items to pay it off." "Tommy Shelby?" Lupin echoed, puzzled. "You mean Johnny Silverhand's Tommy?" "Yes, that's him," Mundungus confirmed. Dumbledore's expression darkened as he held the locket. "John has been searching for this," he realized. Sirius turned to Harry, offering a rare compliment. "You've done well, Harry." He then reflected on the situation. "It seems we've uncovered a secret of that clever boy." Using Mundungus was a smart move, Harry said, though confusion clouded his features. Unbeknownst to John, he was on the verge of discovering a Horcrux hidden by the Order of the Phoenix. He was orchestrating his own plans, unaware of how close he was to unraveling the Order's secrets. Rumors spread through Nocturne Alley, fueled by the ramblings of the Malfoy matriarch at a high society reception. Like a tiny spark igniting dry grass, the whispers grew, expanding rapidly in size and scope. The once muted conversations, hidden in the shadows of the alley, began to swell into a cacophony of speculation and intrigue. The Malfoy family, known for their pride and status, had inadvertently set the stage for a wildfire of gossip. The matriarch's words, perhaps carelessly spoken, became the kindling for an ever-growing blaze of rumors. As the stories evolved, they took on a life of their own, morphing into tales that barely resembled the truth. The residents of Nocturne Alley, always eager for a bit of scandal, embellished the details further with each retelling. The Malfoy family, unwittingly, had become the center of attention, their every move watched with keen interest. The alley, usually a place for dark dealings and the exchange of forbidden goods, was now abuzz with a different kind of trade: information. The whispers snaked their way through the crooked streets, slipping into every nook and cranny, leaving no stone unturned. In the midst of this growing storm of gossip, the Malfoy family found themselves under an unwelcome spotlight. The matriarch's offhand comments at the reception had sparked a fire that seemed impossible to extinguish. As the rumors grew in size and ferocity, they began to take a toll on the family's reputation, casting a shadow over their once impeccable image. The Malfoys, caught in the eye of the storm, were forced to navigate the treacherous waters of public opinion. With each passing day, the challenge grew, as they sought to quell the rumors and reclaim their standing in the wizarding world. But the question remained: could they douse the flames, or would they be consumed by the inferno they had inadvertently ignited? Chapter 423, Something Hidden in Hogwarts. A peculiar question began circulating in Nocturne Alley, whispered like a secret, yet heard by all. "Do you know about that thing?" Many sought its origin, yet it seemed to emerge from the shadows, as elusive as the wind. With only a week until the start of the school term, strange rumors spread like wildfire, becoming almost a greeting among the dark alleys. Isn't there going to be an accident with this kind of publicity? Tangmi, while packing away a candy gift box intended for Ozzy, voiced his concern, noticing the growing attention. "No," John replied, settling into a comfortable chair and finding the perfect angle to recline. With a contented sigh, he leaned forward. "That thing is essentially a contract, nothing more. Its incidental effects aside, it's not a wishing device. If anything, it fulfills my wish alone." A light chuckle escaped him, while Jin, nursing sore hands from managing the shop in John's absence, could only shake his head at the laissez-faire shopkeeper. During John's absence, Jin had taken over the office duties. John, under the guise of allowing Jin to familiarize himself with the responsibilities, had confidently delegated the work, leaving Jin and Tangmi to manage the external and internal affairs, respectively. This arrangement left John with ample leisure. Tangmi harbored concerns about the Holy Grail, rumored to grant rejuvenation and immortality. As its creator, John knew well that its effects were not as miraculous as the rumors suggested. While rejuvenation and immortality were within its capabilities, its powers were limited. The essence of the Holy Grail was to serve as a vessel, channeling the power of the Gate of Things and the Contract of Death. This was the reason John had chosen Hufflepuff's Gold Cup, with the Elixir of Magic and the Philosopher's Stone nurturing the soul within the bond. Our current concern should be acquiring that item from the Order of the Phoenix, John mused, his eyes closed in thought. The thief from Mundungus's family had proven inefficient. Despite the passage of time and the acquisition of valuable items, none were Horcruxes. John's contemplation was interrupted by the arrival of a black, long-eared owl at the window. Riddle landed on the table, delivering a letter into John's hands. As he read, a mix of surprise and contemplation crossed his face. "What's wrong?" Tangmi inquired, noticing the change. "I underestimated Dumbledore," John admitted, twisting the parchment in his hand. "I thought his removal from the headmaster position would leave him in disarray, but he managed to persuade Slughorn to allow his return to Hogwarts." Dumbledore had been granted permission to spend his remaining years at Hogwarts Castle. Slughorn, ever cautious, had not only secured Auror protection from the Ministry of Magic, but had also welcomed the century's greatest wizard back to the school. Dumbledore's wisdom had played well against Slughorn's cautious nature. "To protect Harry?" John pondered aloud, his expression unreadable. "My lord?" Tangmi asked. "Do you need to intervene?" Shaking his head, John dismissed the idea. "Let him stay. Whether it's to counterbalance my influence or to protect Harry, Dumbledore can still play a significant role at Hogwarts." With a calm expression, John burned the letter, watching as it turned to ashes. "Our new headmaster has much to sort out. I hope he manages it soon." John respected Slughorn's decision, which had been supported by the joint invitation of the 4 house deans. His focus was on ensuring a smooth path for the next 2 years. 30 galleons for one use," slurred a drunk wizard, missing a shoe and holding a wine bottle. He hiccuped, a pipe dangling from his lips. In front of him, the missing shoe emitted a sour smell. As the bag of galleons was tossed before him, the wizard's face broke into a grin. Looking up, the figures under the black cloaks remained faceless, their voices a mystery. In the dim light, figures blurred together, making it difficult to distinguish between men and women. "London," the drunk wizard slurred in confirmation. The man cloaked in black approached, his footsteps halting in front of a pair of leather shoes. This was a doorway, a channel not sanctioned by any government, known for its exorbitant cost and use for smuggling purposes. With a firm grip on the shoelaces, the cloaked figure vanished into thin air. The wizard, left behind, opened his purse, the sight of golden coins within sparking a gleeful laughter. In a London suburb, the cloaked figure reappeared. She surveyed her surroundings before her form dissipated in a burst of energy. Her destination was the Blind Pig pub, nestled where Nocturne Alley met Diagon Alley. A gust of wind momentarily lifted the edge of her cloak, revealing skin marred by horrific burns. The pub, indifferent to the attire of its patrons, welcomed her without question. As she made her way to the inner compartment, bypassing the curious gaze of a waiter, the atmosphere changed. The bar's misty, dreamlike ambiance gave way to a more solemn setting where a dignified lady sat, seemingly out of place, yet waiting with intent. The door swung open abruptly, and a curved wand was pressed against the lady's neck, its holder's intentions clear. "Bella," the lady, forced to tilt her head back, spoke with a mixture of defiance and resignation. "You shouldn't have treated me this way. Your husband, your son, they all betrayed the master," came the hoarse, barely feminine reply, laced with suppressed madness and hatred. "Sissy, tell me, how can I seek revenge?" The word revenge made Narcissa's heart race, but she maintained a facade of calm, replying coldly, "That was their doing. I have never betrayed the Dark Lord." "Really?" Bellatrix's voice was skeptical, probing. Narcissa met her gaze unflinchingly, pride evident in her voice. Everything I've done for him has succeeded. Bellatrix slowly withdrew the wand from Narcissa's neck and removed her hood, revealing a face that was both terrifying and pitiable. A significant portion of her skin was marred by wooden nails, a testament to her suffering. "Sissy, I know you wouldn't betray us," she said, her voice softening as she embraced Narcissa, seeking comfort in her presence. "Rodolphus, that damned traitor, he deserved his fate." Bellatrix spat with venom, her disdain for her husband evident despite their shared name. Narcissa, momentarily paralyzed by the sight and touch of her sister's damaged skin, finally found her voice. "How did you survive?" Bellatrix touched a wooden nail on her face, a grim reminder of her past beauty now lost to madness and torture. "Resentment fueled my survival," she confessed, leaning on Narcissa as she recounted her ordeal. Voldemort had used ancient dark magic on Bellatrix, ensuring her survival, but at a great personal cost, stripping away much of her humanity. Voldemort, now with his soul restored, had been methodically eliminating traitors, with the Malfoy family nearly among his victims. However, Narcissa's timely message, sent through a method exclusive to the Black Sisters, had swayed Voldemort's decision, sparing them due to Narcissa's past loyalty. "Oh, my sissy, you wouldn't betray us, would you?" Bellatrix's voice was tinged with vulnerability as she caressed Narcissa's face. "Bella," Narcissa began, her voice heavy with significance, "I have something to tell the Dark Lord about the thing hidden in Hogwarts." Before she could elaborate, Bellatrix's attention sharpened, her interest piqued by the mention of Hogwarts. Narcissa's complexion paled as Bellatrix pressed the sharp tip of her wand against her neck. Bellatrix's demeanor was a mix of madness and despair, her voice oscillating between crying and laughing. "Sissy, you must do something to convince me of your loyalty," she demanded. "What do you expect me to do?" Narcissa's voice was tense, her fingers tightly wrapped around her own wand hidden beneath the table. Bellatrix's eyes were wild with urgency. "I have a mission, and you will assist me, won't you, sissy?" The sharp edge of the wand dug slightly into Narcissa's skin, sending a shiver down her spine. At that moment, Narcissa realized her hand, which was gripping her wand, was also entwined with a cold, slender green snake. She was trapped. With no other choice available, Narcissa slowly released her wand and nodded in resignation. "I will help you," she conceded. Seeing Narcissa's submission, Bellatrix's demeanor shifted once again, returning to a state that bordered on pitiable. Chapter 424, Durmstrang's New Headmaster. Under the veil of night, amidst a downpour, a boo-bird took flight, its wings cutting through the rain. The ground, saturated with water, formed puddles that were disturbed by the heavy footsteps of a man. Mud splashed onto his robe, but he paid it no mind. His goatee, clinging wetly to his thin chin, was the least of his concerns. Panic-stricken, people fled into the dense woods, their figures darting past tree trunks, instilling fear in the man. "No, don't," he pleaded as thunder illuminated the sky, revealing his face, a tall, thin man with white hair, his robe stained and his wand gripped tightly, fear etched into his features. "Please, let me go." Igor Karkaroff, the headmaster of Durmstrang and a former Death Eater, was now reduced to a fugitive, desperately trying to evade capture. The relentless rain added to his humiliation. "Karkaroff," called a voice, delicate as if greeting an old friend. Another flash of lightning split the sky, briefly illuminating the night. Karkaroff's heart sank as he spotted 3 figures 10 meters away, clad in black coats that melded with the darkness, resembling grim reapers come to claim lives. Their presence was momentarily obscured by their black hats as the lightning faded. In a panic, Karkaroff fired a curse towards them, splitting a tree in its path, but his pursuers had vanished. "Who the hell are you?" he screamed into the night, his voice tinged with madness. "We only serve the strong," came the enigmatic reply. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning struck a nearby tree, and Karkaroff realized his assailants were now ominously close, less than 2 meters away. Face to face with them, he was in disbelief. Then, as quickly as they had appeared, they vanished, leaving behind only 3 green lights piercing the night. After the green lights faded, the dark mark appeared in the sky. When Karkaroff was found, he was lifeless, his body cold. Engraved on the trunk of a tree behind him were the words, "This is the end of betrayal. Those who oppose me, be afraid. An old man with rough hands and a broom-like beard examined the scene, his frown deepening. It's him, he said, disbelief in his eyes. Voldemort, he was here. The aurors present scanned the area for clues, their expressions grave. The old man, Yalefan, turned to a man standing behind the aurors and asked, Mr. Edgar, your family is well versed in the dark arts. Despite the prejudiced remark, Ludwig Edgar approached calmly to inspect Karkaroff's body. Avada Kedavra, he concluded, alarming Yalefan. There are signs of a chase. He wasn't alone. Yalefan, agitated, tugged at his beard. This is impossible. He was supposed to be alone. There is a madwoman with him, Ludwig stated, his expression unchanging. We all witnessed Karkaroff's terror. Indeed, Yalefan conceded, unable to deny the evidence before him. Despite his reluctance, he had to face the reality that the Dark Lord might be closer than they thought. An owl descended from the sky, delivering a letter to Ludwig, which Yalefan snatched eagerly. Principal of Durmstrang, he exclaimed, eyes wide. When did this happen? The former principal abandoned the school and fled, Ludwig explained patiently. The school board has extended an invitation to me. Yalefan's beard bristled with indignation. This is irresponsible. The nefarious Edgar should not assume that position. You may discuss your concerns with the board of trustees, Ludwig replied, his tone firm. Now, if you would kindly return my letter. After a moment of heavy breathing, Yalefan reluctantly handed back the letter. I'll speak to them, he threatened before departing with the aurors and Karkaroff's body. Ludwig, holding the letter, mused to himself, the supernatural power is great. After casting one last glance at the ominous message on the tree trunk, he turned and walked away, stepping into a future where he would lead Durmstrang into a new era. The former principal of Durmstrang died, and the newspapers soared into the homes of the Ausens in the wizarding world. As a newspaper delivery owl approached Privet Drive, a snowy owl descended from the sky, swiftly intercepting and snatching the newspaper from its clutches. John observed Basil, the snowy owl, with a mixture of amusement and resignation, accustomed to his assertive antics. He sipped on Mrs. Wick's freshly ground coffee while perusing the newspaper. Dressed in a tie, Watson stood before the mirror, consulting his reflection, which bore an uncanny resemblance to the wizard chess king. "How do I look?" he inquired. "Absolutely dashing," the wizard chess king responded with an approving gesture, humorously adding, "Let's hope the young ladies in the street can handle it." Watson, now donning a red checkered tie, joined the breakfast table, still engrossed in the Daily Prophet. He lamented the lack of an owl to fetch his newspapers, finding them far more intriguing than their Muggle counterparts. "Who's Igor Karkaroff?" Watson inquired with the wide-eyed curiosity of a child. "And what's a Death Eater?" John, between bites of his sandwich, explained in simple terms. He was a school headmaster who once joined a terrorist group and was later killed by them as revenge for betraying their leader. "The magical world has terrorists too?" Watson's eyes widened in surprise. His interest piqued by the mention of, "I swing the great sword at Hogwarts." He requested John to purchase a set for him along with his textbooks. John agreed nonchalantly, their easy rapport evident in their interaction. Mrs. Wick watched her husband and son with a mix of amusement and affection, glancing at the wall clock to remind them of the time. With 10 minutes to spare, Watson hastily finished his meal, apologizing for not being able to accompany them shopping due to issues at the hotel. He shared a brief moment with his wife before rushing off. John, noticing his mother's flushed face, discreetly raised the newspaper to hide his own mixed emotions. Watson, on a whim, had wanted to join them for textbook shopping, but the hotel's urgent matters demanded his attention, leaving him to promise to see John off to school instead. After breakfast, John and Mrs. Wick set off in the car. Though John could have easily teleported, he chose to share this moment with his mother. As they drove through the rain, John was lost in thought until Mrs. Wick spoke up, sharing insights into his father's initial skepticism and discomfort with the magical world. She explained how his father had gradually opened up to magic, driven by love and concern for John, despite his underlying fears about the dangers of the wizarding world. Reaching an intersection, their conversation paused as they waited for the traffic. Mrs. Wick looked at John with warmth, expressing their pride and unconditional love for him. John, touched by his mother's words, reciprocated the sentiment, affirming his love for his parents. Their tender moment was abruptly interrupted by a car horn, prompting Mrs. Wick to roll down the window and gesture apologetically to the driver behind them. In an act of international diplomacy, John initiated his journey with a sense of foreboding, well aware of his elderly mother's notorious temper. With a helpless shake of his head, he caught a glimpse of the infuriated pickup truck driver in his rearview mirror. Without a hint of emotion, John snapped his fingers. In an instant, the old driver's tire deflated, sending the vehicle careening into a fire hydrant by the roadside. John knew all too well that witnessing the misfortune of others was the only remedy for Mrs. Wick's bouts of road rage. In his mind, he couldn't help but consider himself a dutiful son for maintaining peace in such a peculiar manner. Chapter 425, The Attacked Malfoy and the Leaky Cauldron. The leaky cauldron, often viewed with disdain, was unusually quiet as John stepped in. A brief moment of silence was followed by hushed whispers among the patrons. Unperturbed, John made his way through the back alley and entered Diagon Alley, feeling a twinge of regret that Watson couldn't join him this time. "What book are you looking to purchase?" John hadn't visited the Lehan bookstore in quite some time, having opted to have his teaching materials delivered to his home the previous year. His gaze briefly lingered on a book that seemed as ferocious as a rabid dog, caged away, before meeting the eyes of the despondent clerk. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, Advanced Potion Making. He listed off a series of titles, noticing a spark of life return to the clerk's eyes at the prospect of not having to handle the menacing book. Mrs. Wick, who had accompanied him, chuckled upon hearing his choices. "Your book at home often chases Tom's tail," she remarked. "That must be quite the sight," John mused, imagining Tom, unfazed and possibly even enjoying the chase. After purchasing all the necessary books from Lion Bookstore, they still had a few more items to buy. John stuffed "I Swing the Greatsword at Hogwarts" into his bag, pondering over Watson's decision not to buy this popular wizarding book during their trip. Their next stop was the ice cream parlor, which Mrs. Wick found overwhelmingly potent. Wizards, due to their unique constitution, could indulge in sweets and desserts without the immediate worry of tooth decay, unlike their non-magical counterparts. Mrs. Wick, with her keen interest in fashion and skilled tailoring, was more drawn to the clothing stores. Notices about staying vigilant and wanted posters with moving images dotted the streets, but the hustle and bustle of Diagon Alley seemed unaffected by Voldemort's return. John observed young wizards, accompanied by their parents, excitedly entering Ollivander's wand shop, and a girl clutching dragon-roasted chestnuts from Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, the aroma enticing a nearby boy. Small stalls selling dubious amulets had popped up along the street, targeting the uninformed. The Ministry of Magic had recently established a department to address such scams. Mrs. Wick, however, was not easily fooled. When a wizard with an unusually large nose tried to sell her an amulet, claiming it offered 90% resistance to dark arts, she dismissed him without a second glance. The wizard, undeterred, turned his attention to a large family nearby, not realizing they were the Weasleys, with a member who worked for the ministry in combating fraudulent magical items. John and Mrs. Wick then proceeded to Madame Malkin's robes for all occasions. John's rapid growth meant frequent visits for new robes. Madame Malkin, recognizing John as the youngest recipient of the Order of Merlin, suggested he model for her shop. However, as the owner of the competing Silver Hand series, John politely declined. Mrs. Wick beamed with pride at her son's reputation in the wizarding world, realizing his achievements extended far beyond academic excellence. As Madame Malkin took John's measurements, the door to the shop opened. John, momentarily distracted and hindered by a slight blur in his right eye, couldn't immediately identify the newcomer. A coat hanger obscured their view of each other, but John had a hunch about the identity of the person who had just entered. The fiery mass of red hair was the first thing Hermione noticed, but Madame Malkin was nowhere to be seen. As she was about to inquire about her whereabouts, Hermione's attention was diverted by a man lurking behind a clothes hanger, catching her eye. Ron, noticing the change in Hermione's demeanor, was about to voice his concern when an arrogant voice echoed from outside. "Who do you think I am?" The voice, unmistakably familiar to both Harry and Ron, prompted them to turn. The door swung open, revealing Draco Malfoy and his mother, Narcissa, entering with a flurry of key Ursa's. To save face, call him Mister. If you don't, I'll just let him die, Draco boasted, spouting phrases of dubious origin. Narcissa's expression was clouded with disapproval. Upon entering Madame Malkin's robe shop, Narcissa's gaze swept the room indifferently. Draco, spotting the trio, immediately adopted a confrontational stance. I was wondering who was causing such a commotion. It turns out to be our savior, Harry Potter, he said with heavy sarcasm. Harry's expression darkened, but Draco, undeterred, continued. What? Did you hire a bodyguard? Do you really see yourself as some kind of savior? He then mockingly cried out, Oh no, Voldemort, Dumbledore, save me! Mimicking fear so exaggeratedly that Harry felt an urge to retaliate. Malfoy, shut up, Ron growled, standing up to him. Draco glanced at Ron, his sneer widening. What's the matter? The savior's little sidekick wants to stand up for him? He taunted, gesturing dismissively. I don't even need a wand to deal with you. Ron's face flushed with anger, torn between being labeled a follower and being underestimated. Come on then, who's afraid? He challenged. Draco, Narcissa interjected, her frown deepening at her son's antics. Draco, however, merely snorted dismissively. Be thankful I don't want to dirty my clothes today. Ron was seething, and Harry, too, was on the brink of confrontation, his hand inching towards his wand. It was then he noticed Hermione's silence. Turning, he saw her hesitating to step forward, clearly not intimidated by Malfoy, which meant something else was amiss. John? Ah, the lady. Draco suddenly shifted his tone upon noticing John and Mrs. Wick, his demeanor transforming into that of a courteous young man. Mrs. Wick, Draco Malfoy, a friend of John's, he introduced himself with an air of politeness that left Ron gaping, more shocked than if he had seen Snape washing his hair. Draco, I've heard John speak of you. A very lively friend, Mrs. Wick complimented, to which Draco responded with visible pride. John, catching Narcissa's glance, returned it briefly before addressing Draco with a frown. As Madame Malkin took his measurements, John approached Draco, straightening his collar with a casual, Draco, you should pay more attention to your image. After adjusting his collar, Draco touched it subconsciously, looking slightly puzzled as John announced his departure to the cauldron shop. As John reached the door, he paused upon seeing Hermione's disappointed gaze. He nodded to her slightly, before exiting without a word, leaving Hermione feeling disheartened, her spirits not lifted even by the subsequent fitting of her robes. Outside, Hagrid was waiting. Upon seeing John, he greeted him with surprise and concern. John, are you in there? You don't know how worried I was about what happened to you. Sorry, Hagrid, I should have told you first, John apologized, as Hagrid lifted him in a bear hug, a familiar gesture that was both comforting and slightly overwhelming. After setting John down, Hagrid's presence seemed to bring a sense of normalcy back to the day's unexpected events. Mrs. Wick met the towering figure of Rubeus Hagrid with a mixture of surprise and politeness. You must be Mrs. Wick? My name is Rubeus Hagrid, a friend of John's. Hagrid introduced himself, a hint of embarrassment in his voice. John quickly added, and he's still a professor at Hogwarts. He reached out, patting Hagrid's ample stomach with a grin. Hagrid's classes might not be the most conventional, but they're certainly the most thrilling and engaging. Hagrid, slightly flustered by the introduction, scratched his head and exchanged pleasantries with Mrs. Wick, who found herself impressed by the gentle giant she had first encountered in Diagon Alley. It was unexpected, yet delightful, to see John had forged a friendship with him. Their conversation soon turned to Grop, Hagrid's half-brother, who had recently begun to articulate a few more words, much to Hagrid's delight. After bidding farewell, John and Mrs. Wick continued their shopping, spree across various stores. Meanwhile, Draco Malfoy emerged from Madame Malkin's shop, his curiosity piqued by the proximity to Nocturne Alley. He ventured ahead, oblivious to his mother Narcissa's concerned expression. The alley was deserted, its narrow houses featuring tightly sealed and shuttered windows. It wasn't long before Draco stopped in his tracks, his gaze landing on a woman with scarred skin. Bellatrix? He uttered, his demeanor shifting instantly. Mom, go ahead, Draco said, drawing his wand with a calmness that belied his years. I can handle her. Go to Dad or John. The transformation in Draco was evident. He was no longer the boy he once was. He watched Bellatrix with a wary eye as she approached, her expression twisted in madness. "Draco, little Draco, give Auntie a hug," she cooed, causing Draco's stomach to churn. He retorted with a sneer. "Have you seen yourself? You're repulsive." Bellatrix, driven by madness, launched an attack. In the ensuing duel, sparks flew as both wizards unleashed their power. Draco, having trained with Barty Crouch Jr., had seen his combat skills improve significantly. Even against Bellatrix, he managed to hold his own for a time. Suddenly, a third voice interrupted. "Disarm your opponent." Before Draco could process the new threat, his wand was blasted from his grip, and Bellatrix's next spell sent him flying. As he lay unconscious, a small emerald snake slithered from the shadows, marking his cheek with a scarlet slash. Narcissa, witnessing the scene, trembled with a mix of fear and rage, tears threatening to spill. "Can you trust me now?" she demanded, her voice shaking. Bellatrix's response was a cruel laugh. Narcissa closed her eyes, pain etched on her face, her hand clutching a silver ring, a deadly weapon against her sister, hidden until now. "Of course, Sissy, my favorite sister," Bellatrix taunted. In the darkened alley, Draco remained unconscious, unaware of the silent observers behind closed doors and windows. And among them, John made no move to intervene. Chapter 426, The Emerald Little Snake. Malfoy was discovered lying unconscious by a wizard who happened to be passing by. At that moment, he was sprawled on his back, and upon awakening, he found himself in Silver Cross Hospital. Feeling somewhat disoriented, Malfoy rubbed his face in an attempt to clear his head. Shortly thereafter, he was escorted by a therapist for a thorough examination. After being declared fully recovered, he was informed that he could leave the hospital. As he approached the counter to settle his bill, Malfoy felt a nagging sensation that he was forgetting something important. He muttered to himself, "Forget it. If there's something I don't understand, I'll just ask John. He'll have the answers." When it was his turn to complete the discharge process, he was taken aback by the cost. "What, 100 galleons?" Malfoy was astounded. He had only been lying down for a short while. How could they possibly charge him 100 galleons? The nurse, clad in a pristine white uniform, smiled sweetly and explained, "Yes, during your coma, our top therapist conducted a comprehensive examination. The cost of the equipment used, along with labor costs, amounts to that sum." Her voice was as soothing as that of a customer service representative, which only served to sour Malfoy's mood further. "Which bastard had me undergo so many tests?" he grumbled. If he ever found out who was responsible, he vowed never to let them off easily. Meanwhile, Neville was in Diagon Alley purchasing textbooks when he suddenly sneezed. As he rubbed his nose, Madame Longbottom offered him a robe, noting, "Neville, your arms are getting thicker again. We should ask Madame Malkin to make some adjustments." "Thank you, but I'd prefer a different fabric," Neville replied. His current robe was constantly stretched at the arms, restricting his movement. After leaving the hospital, Malfoy held a 2-inch thick physical examination report in his hand. The report was so detailed that it even included a note about his number 12 hair fork in the third row from the left. This wasn't just a medical report. It was practically a manual on Malfoy himself. No wonder the cost was 100 galleons. However, with medical insurance, the expense would have been halved to 50 galleons. Unfortunately, as Malfoy was not employed in Nocturne Alley, he was ineligible for medical insurance. "Where's Mom?" He suddenly remembered that he hadn't arrived at the hospital alone. He tried to recall the events leading up to his hospitalization, but his memory was frustratingly blank after he and his mother left Mrs. Mojan's gown store. Walking along the cobblestone road of Nocturne Alley, Malfoy reflected on how some parents brought their children here to broaden their horizons, provided they didn't touch anything indiscriminately. After all, one wrong move could result in a child frightening others with a voodoo head. Most visitors seldom ventured beyond the overturned garden, but Malfoy pressed on, determined to find John. He attempted to enter Johnny Silverhand's store, calling out for the owner, but was promptly ejected by the security team. "What grade do you think you are? Demanding to see the boss," they scoffed. The indignity of being scolded was enough to infuriate Malfoy, who had hoped to encounter an acquaintance in the garden. His luck turned when Astoria spotted him and started to approach, only to be halted by a stern look from her sister, Daphne. Daphne, leading Astoria by the hand, approached Malfoy with cautious steps. "Draco, what are you doing here?" she asked, puzzled by his presence in the overturned garden. "I'm waiting for John," Malfoy replied, his tone lacking conviction. "John?" Daphne scanned the area, her interest piqued. "Is John coming?" Malfoy answered honestly. "I don't know. I couldn't get into Johnny the Silver Hand, so I decided to wait here." Daphne barely suppressed the urge to scold him. "Couldn't you have sent a message to John?" she asked, incredulous. "A message?" Malfoy echoed, confused. It was then that Astoria noticed something amiss. "Where's your badge? Why isn't it with you?" she inquired. Malfoy's hand instinctively went to his chest, his panic evident. "That's right, where is my badge?" he exclaimed, frantically searching his person but finding no trace of the star badge. "Could it have fallen off?" Astoria mused, knowing Malfoy's penchant for displaying his badge prominently. Malfoy racked his brain, trying to piece together his last memories with the badge. "I definitely had it before I left. I went to Madame Malkin's robe store, then to the Lion bookstore, and then—" His voice trailed off as he struggled to fill in the gaps in his memory. The news of Malfoy's mysterious affliction spread rapidly within the Star Society, stirring whispers of an attack. By the afternoon, Malfoy found himself in the somber confines of Silverhand Manor, with John attempting to restore his memory. Lucius Malfoy, his expression fraught with worry, clutched his wife's arm, revealing that she, too, had fallen victim to an amnesiac spell, her memories erased. "Your Excellency, my wife has forgotten everything," Lucius said, his voice tinged with fear. Could it be his doing? The mention of Karkaroff's demise brought Voldemort's potential for revenge to the forefront of his mind. John, with a grave expression, did not dismiss the possibility that Voldemort had targeted Lucius's family. He glanced at Narcissa, who appeared bewildered and disoriented, a clear victim of Voldemort's ruthless tactics. It was alarming how far Voldemort was willing to go, erasing even Narcissa's memories. John had anticipated such moves, but Lucius's lapse in vigilance had left his family vulnerable. Despite the uncertainty of Voldemort's motives, John advised Lucius to bolster their defenses. "We must prepare for any eventuality. I'll have Tongmi secure Malfoy Manor with protective measures," John assured him before departing. Left in the quiet of the manor, Malfoy lamented his lost memories, feeling as though a part of him was missing. John, now more relaxed in Lucius's absence, reassured him. "Your physical health is intact, right?" Malfoy confirmed, presenting a small booklet detailing his condition, which, aside from some minor issues due to recent stress, showed no significant problems. John, with a casual gesture, straightened Malfoy's collar and remarked, "It seems Voldemort is still lurking in the shadows." To Malfoy's surprise, John retrieved a slender, pen-shaped silver bottle hidden within his collar, a container for his memories, captured during a seemingly innocuous visit to Madame Malkin's robe shop. Malfoy was astounded, realizing that John had planned this all along. "You knew?" he asked, bewildered. John explained that the visit to the shop was no mere coincidence, but a calculated move, anticipating an attack. He then released the captured memories, transforming them into a silver mist that enveloped them, replaying the events leading to Malfoy's memory loss. As the memories unfolded, Malfoy was confronted with the shocking revelation that his mother, under Bellatrix's influence, had been a part of the scheme. The sight of Narcissa wielding a wand against him was almost too much to bear, prompting a dramatic reaction that John swiftly interrupted, insisting there was a rationale behind her actions. They watched as Narcissa's loyalty was put to the test, a cruel experiment orchestrated by Bellatrix. A small green snake, instrumental in the theft of Malfoy's stellar badge, caught John's attention, a reminder of the snake that had attacked Mr. Weasley. This revelation not only shed light on the events leading to Malfoy's memory loss, but also hinted at a deeper, more sinister plot within the wizarding world, one that John was determined to unravel. The dimensions seemed off. Voldemort didn't show up. It appears he hasn't returned here, John mused to himself. Voldemort had only dispatched Bellatrix, but where was he himself? Suddenly, Malfoy clenched his teeth in frustration and exclaimed, "It's him!" John glanced up, only to see Narcissa, having forgotten her memory, leaving without a second thought for her own son. After a while, Neville, alerted by John, arrived and escorted Malfoy to Silver Cross Hospital. This action caused Malfoy to seethe with irritation. "I spent 100 galleons on a slew of medical examinations," he grumbled. John coughed twice, subtly reminding Malfoy that it was he who had insisted on the thorough checkup, considering the uncertainty of potential after-effects. However, Malfoy was unaware that John had orchestrated these events, mistakenly preparing to confront Neville over the matter. John attempted to intervene with a few words, but to no avail. He then raised his hand and pressed it forward, as if hitting a pause button, and the scene came to a halt. As he drew back, the image froze on an emerald-green snake. Staring into the small snake's red eyes, John was lost in contemplation. Could this be Voldemort's new Horcrux? He wondered. Chapter 427, The Journey to Hogwarts. On the first day of school, Watson was visibly exhausted, his eyes shadowed by thick, dark circles that made one wonder what he had been up to the night before. Having stayed up all night to read through the entire collection of Lockhart's books, Watson was barely keeping himself awake. Throughout the drive to King's Cross Station, John sat beside him, silently praying his father wouldn't nod off at the wheel. Thankfully, Watson's determination saw them through, and they arrived safely at their destination. Tom, the family dog, seemed to have regained his zest for life, happily wagging his tail as Mrs. Wick led him away. "Do you need to catch some sleep here?" John asked, concerned for his father. Watson, revitalized by a sip of his coffee, his so-called source of life, vowed, "I promised to see you off to school, and I intend to keep that promise." After parking the car, Watson signaled to a line of black vehicles behind them. A man in a suit approached, receiving instructions to have the others wait there. John noted his father's increasing prominence. Outings now seemed to necessitate a security detail. Watson explained the situation in a way that John could understand. Due to a recent incident at a hotel and the company's lack of trust, these men in suits were assigned for their protection. Without the bodyguards in tow, Watson and John made their way to King's Cross Station. Standing before the magical entrance to Platform 9 3/4, Watson couldn't help but express his envy. John, holding Tom's leash, nodded to his family and proceeded through the barrier to the other side, where a different world awaited. Once through, John released Tom, whose leash magically transformed into a bracelet and was tucked away. Tom eagerly ran ahead to secure a seat on the train, while John followed at a more leisurely pace. Tom's presence on the train drew attention. Familiar students greeted him warmly, while others looked on with curiosity. Upon finding their compartment, Tom, now perched by the window, was quickly spotted by Daphne, who approached and was greeted with affection by the dog. Soon after, Malfoy arrived with Goyle and Crabbe, their earlier worries seemingly forgotten. Their father's sentence to Azkaban had been unexpectedly reduced to 2 years, a relief to them. Astoria and Pansy joined them shortly, having been busy exchanging some items. As the train journeyed on, Daphne and Malfoy, now prefects, left to inspect the carriages. Upon returning, Malfoy's mood had soured, his disdain for Harry Potter evident as he mocked, "Have you seen Savior Potter? Surrounded by girls, he's quite the sight." He referred to Harry's recent encounter, surrounded by a group of girls, a scene heavily reported by the Daily Prophet, in light of the Ministry of Magic's focus shifting towards the Order of the Phoenix and Harry, following the dissolution of the Society of Stars. Harry, known as the boy who lived since childhood, had once again become a central figure, despite the public's unclear understanding of his actions at the Ministry. This hero worship was common among students, with many eager to associate with Harry, much to the delight of some girls who saw it as a chance to boost their own status. Like a peacock in heat, Malfoy sneered, his jealousy thinly veiled. Daphne remained silent, accustomed to Malfoy's bitter rants about Harry. However, Malfoy's attention soon shifted to Astoria, who appeared troubled. Concerned, he asked, "Astoria, what's wrong? Are you feeling okay?" "Astoria, are you feeling uncomfortable?" Daphne, with a sharp focus, noticed something amiss. She glanced at Malfoy with a piercing gaze before turning to Astoria with concern. "Did you eat something bad?" "No," Astoria shook her head, her expression troubled. "It's Pansy. She has a new boyfriend again." "We'll have to look into that," Malfoy sighed in relief, realizing Astoria's discomfort wasn't due to an accident. He spoke with a dismissive tone. Pansy always seems to attract those the ill intentions. Indeed, Pansy's history with boyfriends was troubling. Her first was pen pal Tom Riddle, and her second was a boy who betrayed all of Slytherin. The third was expelled this year, thanks to Pansy herself delivering evidence to Snape. It was likely he'd face charges for harming a classmate and spend years in Azkaban. So, when Malfoy made his comment, nods of agreement followed from everyone in the carriage. Unfortunately, Pansy overheard their conversation. She stormed in, seized Malfoy by his hair, and dragged him out. Moments later, Malfoy returned, his collar askew and his head bound by a tie, stubbornly stating, "I just don't hit women." "Yeah, we both know that," John replied dryly. Astoria, feeling sorry for Malfoy, took out her wand and gently tapped his nose, casting Tergio. The shoe prints on Malfoy's face vanished, and a small whirlwind tidied his hair. "Thank you, Astoria," Malfoy said, fixing his tie and sharing a grateful look with her, only to meet Daphne's glare. Suddenly, a knock on their carriage door interrupted the moment. A timid third-year boy, barely able to meet their eyes, stammered, "Hi, hello, I'm here to deliver these." "Did you leave your vocal cords at home?" Malfoy snapped, clearly unimpressed. The third year, intimidated by Malfoy's reputation, quickly handed over 3 scrolls tied with purple ribbons to John, Daphne, and Malfoy. Malfoy, after a brief inspection, allowed the boy to scurry away. John opened his scroll, revealing an invitation from Professor Slughorn for lunch in Box C. Malfoy, after a moment of confusion, realized Astoria hadn't received one and called out to the boy to correct the mistake. Astoria, trying to hide her disappointment with a forced smile, was comforted by Daphne's reassuring grip on her hand. Malfoy, returning to the carriage, grumbled about the oversight. John, noticing Astoria's distress, decided to cheer her up. He conjured a small box tied with a sky-blue ribbon and handed it to her, urging her to open it. Inside, Astoria found a stellar badge with her name on it, the stars upon it shifting mesmerizingly. Overwhelmed with emotion, she covered her mouth, tears brimming in her eyes. John smiled. "I've been thinking." Astoria bit her lip, turning her head away in an effort to hide her tears. She caught sight of her sister Daphne's encouraging gaze and Malfoy's supportive nod. This moment, long awaited, had finally arrived. Sensing her emotional turmoil, John stood up with a casual air, suggesting, "It's time for us to step outside." Understanding that Astoria needed a moment alone to process her emotions, Malfoy and Daphne quietly exited the room. Once alone, Astoria's suppressed sobs filled the space. She wiped away her tears haphazardly, her mind racing back to the days when she dreamt of joining the Star Society. Surrounded by such exceptional individuals, she felt utterly invisible, convincing herself early on that she was unworthy of such an honor. This belief drove her to work tirelessly, striving to prove herself and stand shoulder to shoulder with her sister. However, amidst the luminaries, it seemed impossible for anyone to notice her. Despite her silence on the matter, today's events had deeply wounded her. She felt inadequate, lacking even a simple invitation letter. But now, those concerns seemed trivial. What did Slughorn's invitation matter? The Star Society's acceptance had validated Astoria Greengrass's worth, not as a consolation but as a recognition of her merit. John's words had made it clear. There were no shortcuts or pity involved. She was acknowledged as one of the best, a shining star among stars. This realization marked a turning point for Astoria. The doubts and insecurities that had once clouded her self-perception were now dispelled. She understood that her value and abilities were recognized on their own merits. With renewed confidence, Astoria was ready to embrace her place in the Star Society, standing proudly among those she had long admired. Chapter 428, The Party on the Train. In Compartment C, besides John and his companions, there were several other students. John was well aware of Professor Slughorn's interests. The students who received invitations were either well-reputed or came from notable backgrounds. Draco Malfoy fixed Harry with a sharp glance, causing Harry to appear momentarily dazed. Surprisingly, Ginny Weasley was also present. Among the others were Blaise Zabini, a Slytherin in John's year, and Cormac McLaggen, whose uncle held a high-ranking position at the Ministry of Magic, akin to that of Pierce. Upon John's arrival, Slughorn, with some effort, turned to greet him amidst the cramped space. The others in the compartment made room. John, Daphne, Draco, Neville Longbottom greeted them warmly. Blaze attempted to rise quickly, but his knee collided with the table. Cormac hesitated before standing and nodding in John's direction. "John, it's wonderful to see you," Slughorn exclaimed, his enthusiasm palpable. "And I believe these two are Miss Greengrass and Mr. Malfoy. Excellent company." Slughorn motioned towards a seat by the door, but then, with even greater eagerness, he ushered John to sit beside him. "Well, you all know these fine individuals?" Slughorn inquired. Before anyone else could respond, Blaze, an avid admirer of John, interjected, "You have no idea how talented he is." Slughorn's smile widened as he nodded, adding, "I might know more than you think. Dharma Alex Belby, the inventor of Wolfsbane Potion and a great friend of John's, was once my student. He told me John Wick is undoubtedly the most gifted student of the century." Pleased with his own praise, Slughorn continued, "I've brought my own lunch. The scent of the food trolley's offerings is always a bit too overpowering for my delicate digestion." He then offered Draco what seemed to be half a frozen quail, mentioning, "Your father was a student of mine. I've visited his museum. Impressive, isn't it?" Draco, swelling with pride, accepted the quail. "Of course, my father enjoys making his mark in the wizarding world," he said, a hint of arrogance in his voice. Slughorn, however, made sure to engage with all the students, considering them his future collections. He expressed his amazement at Neville Longbottom's family's miraculous recovery, a topic that intrigued him as a potions master. He also discussed political dealings with Daphne Greengrass, noting the Greengrass family's recent prosperity. Eventually, Slughorn's attention turned to Harry Potter, inquiring about the Ministry of Magic battle. Harry felt uncomfortable discussing the event, especially since 4 of the people present had been his adversaries at the time. He was also cautious about revealing certain secrets unknown to John, which made him feel somewhat guilty. When mentioning the prophecy orb, Harry inadvertently glanced at Malfoy, who responded with a provocative smile, further irritating Harry. The gathering concluded with Slughorn sharing anecdotes about the distinguished wizards he had taught, all of whom had been members of his Slug Club. The party didn't realize how much time had passed until the red glow of sunset filled the compartment. As the head of Slytherin, Slughorn knew he couldn't let the students disembark without ensuring they were properly looked after, demonstrating his perpetual care for his collections. Dressed in their school uniforms and robes, the students left the classroom one after another, each receiving a warm smile from Professor Slughorn as they departed. However, as Slughorn turned around, he noticed John still standing in place. "John?" Slughorn inquired, his smile broadening at the prospect of a private conversation with John. "Is there something else you need?" "Professor Slughorn, I have a question for you," John said, causing Slughorn's smile to momentarily freeze as he recalled a letter he had been too frightened to respond to. "If it's concerning taboo subjects," Slughorn began hesitantly. "It's somewhat related," John replied, noticing Slughorn's discomfort but quickly adding, "but it's not what you're thinking." This reassurance seemed to relax Slughorn, who then encouraged John to ask his question. "I'm curious about why I was awarded the Merlin Medal," John stated, his tone calm and thoughtful. "I'm conducting research on blood curses." Relieved that the conversation wasn't veering towards Horcruxes, Slughorn was more than willing to offer guidance. After all, John wasn't just any student, he was the youngest recipient of the Merlin Medal. Slughorn had his peculiarities. Some might call him snobbish due to his tendency to favor bright students, offering them his attention and resources while maintaining a neutral stance towards those he deemed less exceptional. John, however, didn't see this as entirely negative. He believed that privilege served as a powerful motivator, encouraging hard work and ambition. Exiting Box C, John encountered Malfoy, who seemed to be waiting for someone. "Why are you lingering here?" John inquired. "Daphne thinks you should speak with Astoria first," Malfoy replied, his expression sour. "And why not discuss Atuo?" John asked, walking towards the carriage with Malfoy trailing behind. Clearing his throat guiltily, Malfoy muttered, "That's just a nickname. Our relationship is purely platonic." John chose not to comment and continued walking. Near the carriage, they overheard Blaze Zabini excitedly recounting a recent event. "John, you won't believe what Ginny Weasley did. She sent Zachariah Smith flying with a perfectly executed bat bogey hex, Blaise exclaimed, admiration clear in his voice. I'm smitten. I've decided to pursue her. Malfoy, taken aback, exclaimed, You're interested in a Gryffindor? It seemed that John's influence had led Blaise to admire strong-willed individuals, regardless of their house affiliation. Ginny Weasley, with her combination of strength and beauty, had caught his eye. Blaise, slightly embarrassed, sought John's opinion. Do you think I stand a chance? There's no shame in pursuing someone you admire, John replied with a chuckle. Stay gracious, Blaise. Malfoy leaned in and whispered, Percy is going to have a fit. He's overly protective of his sister. John shrugged. A little challenge never hurt anyone. It's part of growing up. As they made their way back to the carriage, they noticed Pansy Parkinson cozying up to Theodore Nott, which seemed to relieve Malfoy. Finally, Pansy, you've chosen someone sensible. Theodore is one of our own, Malfoy announced a bit too loudly. John gave Malfoy a look that spoke volumes about the wisdom gained from past experiences. The dynamics between childhood friends like Malfoy and Pansy often fluctuated between affection and rivalry, and in their case, it leaned towards the latter. Upon hearing Malfoy's comment, Pansy's demeanor shifted dramatically, proving that even the closest of friendships could face tumultuous times. As they settled into the carriage, Malfoy, nursing a bruised lip, muttered, I just don't hit women. The journey back was filled with a mix of reflection and anticipation, as each student pondered their own challenges and aspirations within the magical world of Hogwarts. Chapter 429, Harry's Discovery. Get off, Draco Malfoy commanded, delivering a kick to Gregory Goyle's rear, prompting him to vacate the seat. Goyle, nursing his bruised ego and bottom, didn't dare retort. Vincent Crabbe, ever curious, inquired, What did Professor Slughorn want with you? Malfoy, sprawling across the now vacated seat, replied with a hint of disdain. Just a casual chat, really. I suspect he's merely trying to ingratiate himself with the families of influential figures. He scoffed, adding, Unfortunately, his judgment seems lacking, given he invited Potter as well. In the past, Malfoy might have seized the opportunity to mock Ginny Weasley, given her brother Ron's less-than-stellar reputation. And who else was on the guest list? Crabbe asked. McLaggen, for one. Not the sharpest tool in the shed, but his uncle holds a high-ranking position. Malfoy sneered. Can you believe he actually wagered last year that he could eat Maisie eggs? Utterly foolish. Gryffindor must be teeming with such imbeciles. Laughter filled the carriage, the consensus clear. Anyone who would make such a bet was a fool indeed. Meanwhile, John noticed a strap slipping from a bag on the luggage rack. Crabbe, ever helpful, resecured it. I'm certain Blaise was also invited. He boasted about hunting with his uncle, a tale as fanciful as any of Potter's adventures. Malfoy continued, his disdain for Harry Potter as palpable as ever. Blaise Zabini chuckled at the comparison. Harry Potter, the little quail, showcasing his talents at his mother's behest. Slytherin discussions about Potter invariably ended in laughter, but this time, Blaise's mirth was interrupted by a falling umbrella that struck him on the head. Whose umbrella is this? Blaise asked, perplexed. That would be mine. How did it end up hitting you? Goyle claimed, equally baffled. The exchange grew heated until Malfoy, asserting his authority as Slytherin prefect, demanded, Enough! Goyle, hand me the umbrella. His command was promptly obeyed. After a brief inspection, Malfoy inquired about its usual location, to which Goyle pointed to the luggage rack above. Returning the umbrella, Malfoy's gaze lingered on the luggage rack, his sneer taking on a new edge. Ah, the elusive Potter, our savior, now a spectacle for even our new headmaster. His discovery made, Malfoy chose not to cause a scene. John, Daphne, and Astoria, having changed into their school uniforms, were the first to depart, with John advising Malfoy not to keep the new headmaster waiting. Once alone, Malfoy's sneer widened. If you had any sense, Potter, you wouldn't be hiding in someone else's carriage. With a swift motion, he drew his wand and cast Petrificus Totalis. A red light struck the luggage rack, revealing Harry Potter, frozen and curled up. Malfoy, smirking with malice, leaned in close. Quite bold of you, Potter, eavesdropping here. Eavesdropping? More like enduring your ludicrous messiah complex, Harry might have retorted had he been able. Your recklessness has a price, Malfoy said coldly, delivering a kick to Harry's face. Consider this a lesson for the chaos at the ministry. Next time, think before you act. His words were a mix of reprimand and satisfaction, a vent for his pent-up frustrations. In a fit of anger, he glanced at the invisibility cloak in his hand. Such items were commonplace in his house, each crafted from the finest parts of more than a dozen invisible beasts. To him, this cloak was nothing special. Yet, he draped it over Harry with care, ensuring he remained hidden from view. After ensuring Harry's concealment, he spat on the ground in disdain, turned, and walked away, leaving Harry to fend for himself. The train was on the verge of departure, and Harry was fraught with anxiety. He had hoped for someone to come to his aid, but the train had emptied, leaving him alone with his thoughts. He regretted his decision to follow in secret, recalling Dumbledore's hint at a mystery involving John and Slughorn. After leaving the party, Harry had attempted to eavesdrop on their conversation, only to be thwarted by Malfoy guarding the door. Disguised under the invisibility cloak, he had followed John, hoping to uncover anything about Slughorn. Unfortunately, his plan was foiled when he overheard Blaze's intention to pursue Ginny. Unable to contain his anger, Harry impulsively used Goyle's umbrella to strike Blaze on the head. This action caught Malfoy's attention. Harry had hoped Malfoy hadn't seen him, but it was clear he had been spotted. Not only did Malfoy see him, but he also waited for him deliberately. As the train began to move, Harry attempted to cast a spell, similar to how he had with the Dementors, but his wand remained unresponsive. Despite his efforts to make a sound, Malfoy's charms and the petrification spell rendered him silent. Just when Harry thought he would remain undiscovered, the compartment door swung open. A flash of red light broke the spell binding him, and he sat up, a trickle of blood running from his nose. Looking up, he saw a familiar face smiling down at him. "I wanted to surprise you," the person said. "Why are you here?" Harry asked, bewildered. "There's a reason, but we should probably get off this train," the man suggested with a wink, hinting at an adventurous escape. Just before the train left the platform, they jumped off, narrowly avoiding injury. At the start of school feast, Malfoy's curiosity was piqued by the peculiar glasses John wore, resembling two CDs. "Anti-demon glasses, courtesy of the Quibbler magazine," John explained, showing Malfoy the magazine. Malfoy, unimpressed, boasted about his encounter with Harry, assuming he was on his way back home. John's attention, however, was drawn to the staff table, noting 2 vacant seats. "Our new professor hasn't arrived yet," he observed, to which Malfoy dismissively predicted the professor's tardiness. John respected Slughorn's autonomy in selecting first-year students, showing deference to the former Slytherin head. The absence of Dumbledore at the staff table was noted by the students, replaced by an unfamiliar figure. Slughorn introduced himself, his speech less verbose than Dumbledore's, yet still somewhat rambling. The sorting ceremony, led by Professor McGonagall, proceeded as usual, emphasizing unity, friendship, and vigilance against external threats. Following the sorting, Slughorn, revealing his fondness for food, invited everyone to dine. "I haven't had the chance to say this before," he said with a smile, gesturing towards the feast. As an array of delicacies appeared, the meal commenced. Malfoy, indulging in roast chicken, whispered to Astoria about their meal, marking the beginning of another term at Hogwarts. Astoria couldn't help but be amused as she watched someone struggle with the tough, cold quail, comparing it to chewing on strips of cloth. Meanwhile, Daphne frantically sawed at her pudding with a knife until the plate split in 2. The start of school feast was in full swing when Hagrid made a late entrance, waving in John's direction. With only 1 seat remaining, Snape abruptly left, only to return towards the end, looking worse for wear and brandishing his wand. Harry entered alongside a man whose nose was adorned with blood scabs. However, far from appearing angry, his expression was eerily jubilant, as if he had consumed a potion of euphoria. At their arrival, Slughorn, with a gleam of excitement, declared the end of the opening banquet and introduced a new professor. "We are very pleased to welcome Professor Black," he announced. The figure walking towards the staff table under the enchanted sky of the Great Hall had black hair and wore respectable, albeit slightly soiled, clothes, suggesting a recent scuffle. He approached the staff, offering a bow and a graceful smile to the students. "You may already be familiar with Professor Black. He will be taking on the role of Defense Against the Dark Arts professor for this year. This announcement was met with a burst of enthusiastic applause, particularly from the Gryffindor table. Malfoy glanced over, noticing Harry's idiotic grin. The students were stunned. Sirius Black, their professor? Snape's expression could only be described as witnessing an aerial display of excrement. The mixture of disgust and disdain on his face was palpable. His own application for the position had been rejected in favor of his most bitter rival. What was happening? Was this really happening? Chapter 430, The New Professor of the Semester. The announcement of Sirius Black as the new professor had taken everyone by surprise, not least Snape, whose disdain was palpable. However, the students' reactions were a mix of excitement and disbelief. Harry, in particular, was overjoyed, clapping until his hands ached, unable to contain his enthusiasm. Hermione and Ron were equally astonished, having not anticipated Sirius's new role. "Harry, did you know about this?" Hermione inquired, her curiosity piqued. "Before I came here, I swear I was in the dark as much as you were," Harry replied with a smirk, his pride in his godfather evident. "He mentioned he had a surprise for me, but this is beyond anything I imagined." Ron, unable to hide his excitement, exclaimed, "This is brilliant. With Sirius around, Snape won't dare to give us a hard time." It was well known that Gryffindor had long suffered under Snape's biased scrutiny, and Sirius, with his fearless nature and protective streak towards Harry, was seen as the perfect counterbalance. Harry's happiness was so profound that it momentarily eclipsed the memory of Draco Malfoy's earlier aggression. Professor Slughorn, meanwhile, took the opportunity to address the students, emphasizing the increased security measures at Hogwarts in light of the looming threat posed by the Dark Lord. He stressed the importance of vigilance and adherence to school rules, particularly the prohibition of nocturnal wanderings. As the feast concluded, Harry's attention reluctantly shifted from Sirius to the concern Ron voiced about his injured nose. Hermione, ever the helpful friend, quickly remedied the situation with a spell, erasing the physical evidence of Malfoy's attack. The conversation soon turned to Malfoy's probable involvement in Harry's injury, a topic that Harry was keen to avoid, fearing Hermione's reaction if she learned of his eavesdropping on Slughorn. Opting to feign pain, Harry and Ron excused themselves, leaving Hermione to escort the first-year students. On their way, they encountered Hagrid, who shared exciting news about Grop's new home and his own aspirations of training him as an assistant. Despite Ron's skepticism, Harry indulged Hagrid's enthusiasm, not wanting to dampen his spirits. The conversation then shifted to their course selections, with both Harry and Ron admitting they had no intention of taking care of magical creatures, a decision they knew would disappoint Hagrid. The following day, as sixth-year students enjoyed their newfound free time, Draco Malfoy shared a chilling revelation with Astoria about his experiences over the holidays, including being subjected to the Cruciatus Curse multiple times. Despite the severity of his ordeal, Malfoy boasted of his resilience, a statement that left Astoria both worried and impressed. With an expression full of admiration, Astoria exclaimed, "You are amazing." This praise seemed to inflate Malfoy's ego even further, making his proud demeanor almost tangible. Meanwhile, John, somewhat bemused, ate a rice ball, the contents of which were a mystery to him, while observing Malfoy being utterly charmed by Astoria. Daphne, unable to hide her disdain, remarked, "Is she treating him like a child? That's hardly mature." She then turned to John with a smile, offering, "Do you want some milk?" "Just water, thanks," John replied, accepting the glass. During breakfast, the conversation turned to course selection. "Honestly, spells and defense against the dark arts aren't challenging for me," Malfoy boasted, his arrogance reaching new heights. John couldn't help but think that Malfoy could use a reality check. Daphne mentioned she was considering dropping some classes. After breakfast, the sixth-year students lingered to finalize their choices for advanced classes. Astoria headed to her class, leaving the others to wait for their turn to confirm their schedules. Typically, students receive guidance on which courses might suit them best. For some reason, Professor Snape was absent from the auditorium, so Professor McGonagall took charge of the scheduling process. When it came to Goyle and Crabbe, Professor McGonagall appeared somewhat exasperated. The duo barely scraped by academically, with Goyle's only notable achievement being in herbology. Both were advised to attend Defense Against the Dark Arts remedial classes. Malfoy, on the other hand, waited with an air of expectancy for Professor McGonagall to address him, his grades proudly recorded in her book. Despite his failure in History of Magic, Malfoy confidently dropped the course, along with Muggle studies and care of magical creatures, deeming them of little value to him. Daphne's course selections were markedly different, opting to continue with charms, defense against the dark arts, transfiguration, herbology, potions, and more. Professor McGonagall appreciated her studious approach and nodded in approval. When it was John's turn, Professor McGonagall couldn't help but admire his impressive 12 O's, wishing he were one of her students. "Wick, what will you choose?" she asked, though she knew the demanding sixth year might force him to make tough choices due to scheduling conflicts. "I've chosen all," John stated calmly, "but I can't attend all the classes, so I often miss some." Professor McGonagall was taken aback by his blunt admission. "Wick, I hope you'll manage your workload realistically," she advised, her tone serious. John's response was unexpectedly confident, even bordering on arrogance. "I'll manage, as long as I pass the Newt exams," he declared, adding that his choices included alchemy, a course only available to sixth-year students. Despite the daunting prospect of managing 13 courses, Professor McGonagall knew John had the talent to back up his ambition, given his history of excelling in classes he seldom attended. "Very well, proceed as you've planned," she conceded, preparing a schedule that left John to attend classes at his discretion, a privilege reserved for top students. Back in the Slytherin common room, only a handful of sixth-year students were present. Pansy and Theodore were together, with Pansy adopting a cutesy demeanor that seemed at odds with her usual self, a change that Malfoy, now the Slytherin Quidditch team captain, openly criticized as insincere. The dynamics within Slytherin House had shifted, and with the Quidditch team needing new members, Malfoy felt the weight of his responsibilities as captain. Reselection is necessary. Most of the players from the last season were in their 7th year, and this year, they've all graduated. Malfoy finds himself in the position of needing to carefully select and recruit new members for the team. His caution stems from the heavy burden of responsibility that rests on his shoulders as the new captain. From the moment he assumed this role, any loss would not only be a personal failure, but would also pin him to the pillar of shame within Slytherin House. The team's hard-earned streak of 11 consecutive victories has etched a historic mark in Hogwarts history, with each win further extending this legendary record. Just like Montague before him, Malfoy, who harbors an obsession with victory, is aware that the pressure will only intensify. New challenges loom on the horizon, ready to test his resolve. A myriad of training plans began to take shape in Malfoy's mind, his expression twisting into a sinister smile. John, observing him from a distance, couldn't shake the feeling that the Quidditch team was in for a grueling time ahead. Chapter 431, A Unique Lesson. John didn't linger in the lounge for long, as he had classes to attend. Crossing the verdant grass, he encountered Hagrid, who stood with his hands on his hips, radiating confidence. "John, you're the first to arrive," Hagrid greeted, his voice tinged with excitement at the prospect of John choosing his class. He hadn't received the student list yet, but was optimistic about the popularity of his course. "I think the Zou might be feeling lonely lately," Hagrid remarked, noting the absence of other students. He explained how the creature had been causing chaos in the woods due to the lack of a companion. John, thoughtful as ever, suggested, "Perhaps we could craft some toys to help it expend its energy." "That's an excellent idea, John," Hagrid agreed, his spirits momentarily lifted by the proposal. However, as time ticked away, Hagrid's initial enthusiasm waned, replaced by a growing realization. "It seems you're the only one who's chosen my course, John," he said, disappointment creeping into his voice. He speculated that there must have been a scheduling mix-up. "Escaping from reality isn't a solution, Hagrid," John replied gently, urging Hagrid to face the truth of the situation. Despite Hagrid's frustration, John suggested a visit to Grop, Hagrid's half-brother giant, as a way to cheer him up. "This is a unique opportunity, just for you," John added, managing to brighten Hagrid's mood. Without the need for weapons, they ventured towards the forbidden forest. Hagrid reminisced about the durable toy John had made for the Zowu, which Grop had also taken a liking to. John, always thinking ahead, mentioned making a clipboard for Grop to facilitate his reading, a concept that Hagrid hadn't considered but found admirable. Upon reaching Grop's cave, they found the giant restrained with ropes, a precaution Hagrid had taken to prevent him from wandering into Hogwarts. John, however, proposed a different approach. "If you're open to it, I can help ensure Grop stays put without the need for ropes," he offered. Hagrid, intrigued and hopeful, watched as John approached Grop. The giant, initially reaching out, recoiled at the familiar aura of authority emanating from John. With a gesture, John encouraged Grop to lower himself, and then, using mind magic, communicated with the giant. Grop's confused expression gradually shifted to one of understanding. To Hagrid's astonishment, Grop attempted to say John's name. John then firmly instructed, "Don't go where there are people without Hagrid's permission." Grop's nod of understanding brought a wave of excitement to Hagrid. "What did you do, John?" Hagrid asked, eager to learn. John had not only managed to communicate with Grop, but also instilled a sense of responsibility in the giant, showcasing a blend of compassion and authority. This unique lesson, though unintended, became a profound moment of connection and understanding between the creatures of the magical world and those who care for them. John's disappointment, Hagrid suggested, "You should learn from unicorns." The idea of Hagrid, a large and burly man, taking lessons from such a delicate creature seemed absurd, but Hagrid was undeterred. His enthusiasm was evident, even if his explanation to Grop was somewhat muddled. The lesson on magical creature protection concluded successfully with Grop releasing the rope, no longer needing to be restrained. Hagrid was relieved, and as they returned to his cabin, he reminded John not to forget their next class, his tone betraying a hint of worry that John might not show up. John reassured him with a promise to remember. On his way back to the castle, John encountered moaning Myrtle in the second-floor corridor. The ghostly girl hinted at wanting more gifts, playing with the hairpin John had given her previously. She suggested a necklace would make her happy, a request John found amusing, agreeing on the condition that she keep it a secret from the other ghosts. Myrtle, thrilled by the promise, began haunting the girls at Hogwarts, curiously inspecting their necklaces. Upon returning to the common room, John found the atmosphere had returned to normal. Draco Malfoy inquired about Hagrid's lesson, to which John responded with a light-hearted comment. The conversation shifted to Professor Snape's absence, attributed to his aversion to Sirius Black. Malfoy speculated that Snape was feigning illness to avoid encountering Sirius, a theory that seemed plausible given Snape's ability to concoct believable symptoms. The day's schedule included defense against the dark arts and potions, but with Snape's absence, there was uncertainty about who would teach the classes. The mention of Slughorn striking in solidarity with Snape over his disdain for Sirius added to the confusion. As the time for defense against the dark arts approached, John and Malfoy joined the queue outside the classroom, both displaying a lack of enthusiasm for Sirius's class due to their past conflict. The subject's popularity was evident from the crowd, highlighting its importance. Daphne Greengrass arrived, overwhelmed by the workload from her runes class, which had unexpectedly doubled. She handed John an old manuscript, asking for his help with translation, a task she deemed Professor Babbling too lazy to do herself. John offered to store her heavy book in his enchanted bag, a gesture that Malfoy observed with envy. When Sirius opened the classroom door, his pride as a new teacher was palpable. He welcomed the students with a sense of satisfaction, eager to begin the lesson. Sirius's gaze swept over the room, and John's eyes momentarily flicked to Sirius's left rib, noting the speed of his recovery. Catching John's glance, Sirius seemed to grasp the unspoken observation, and his expression darkened. "Seems like you're healing quite fast," John remarked, trying to keep his tone neutral, yet not able to hide a hint of surprise. Sirius let out a sigh, the tension in his shoulders slightly easing. "Magic does have its perks," he replied, though his voice carried a weight that suggested the recovery was not as simple or painless as John might have assumed. The room fell into a brief silence, the air charged with unspoken thoughts and questions. John shifted uncomfortably, realizing his comment might have prodded at a sensitive topic. He was about to change the subject when Sirius spoke up again. "It's not just the physical scars that trouble me," Sirius said, his gaze drifting away, lost in memories that seemed to haunt him. "It's the memories, the constant reminder of what I've been through." John nodded, understanding the depth of Sirius's struggle. The physical healing was just the surface. The psychological scars ran much deeper. "I can only imagine what you've been through," he said softly, offering a supportive presence. Sirius looked back at John, a semblance of gratitude flickering in his eyes. "Thank you, John. It's been a tough journey, but having allies, friends, it makes a difference." The conversation shifted then, moving away from the painful past to the uncertain future. They discussed plans, strategies, and the hope that the darkness that had once overshadowed their lives could eventually be dispelled. Through their dialogue, a bond of understanding and mutual respect was forged, strengthening their resolve to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Chapter 432, Sirius's Dismissal. Every defense against the dark arts professor brings their own unique flair to the classroom, and Sirius Black's was no exception. His classroom was a reflection of his personality, extravagant and filled with a sense of mischievous fun. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the space, while glazed lamps on the walls added a warm glow. As the students settled into their seats, Sirius calmly adjusted his attire. "Before we begin today's lesson, I'd like to share something with you," he began, his voice carrying a charismatic charm. With his curly hair and rugged beard, Sirius had a personable appearance that commanded attention. "I'll never forget my first day walking through the castle gates," he continued, his gaze wandering over the young faces before him, as if transported back to his own school days. "Back then, I wasn't exactly what you'd call a model student. In fact, I was probably more mischievous than any of you could imagine." Leaning back against the table in a relaxed posture, his eyes briefly met Harry's. A silent understanding passed between them, a connection that went beyond words. "In those days, we faced a threat similar to what you're experiencing now. A dark figure was assembling his forces outside these walls, casting a shadow over the magical world." Sirius's tone grew serious. "That's why defense against the dark arts is so crucial. It's not just about passing exams or pursuing certain careers. Sometimes, the knowledge you gain here could very well save your life." The students listened with rapt attention, drawn in by the legend of Sirius Black. Only 3 years prior, he had been an escaped convict, causing an uproar and a sense of panic throughout Hogwarts. Yet it was also then that they learned of his innocence, of his wrongful imprisonment in Azkaban for 12 long years. Sirius's story was one of tragedy and heroism, of battling the Dark Lord, of betrayal by a friend he trusted, and of loyalty to another who was like a brother to him. If his life were a book, it would undoubtedly be a bestseller. As Sirius recounted tales of using defense against the dark arts to escape Death Eaters and reminisced about his days with James Potter, the students felt a growing admiration for their professor. Concluding his story, Sirius shifted the focus back to the lesson at hand. "Now back to class," he announced, but instead of diving into the textbook or starting a lecture, he called out a name: Mr. Malfoy. Draco Malfoy, who had been paying little attention, was caught off guard. "Draco Malfoy," Sirius repeated, this time with a hint of sternness. Malfoy responded with a lazy glance. "What is it?" The classroom buzzed with curiosity, wondering what Malfoy had done to warrant Sirius's attention. 20 points from Slytherin, Sirius declared, causing an immediate stir among the students. Malfoy's laziness vanished, replaced by indignation. "You can't just deduct points without a reason, Professor Black." Sirius met Malfoy's challenge with a cool gaze. "Attacking Harry Potter on the train yesterday seems like a valid reason to me." Harry was taken aback, not expecting Sirius to defend him in such a manner. Malfoy, however, was defiant. "I'll be speaking to Professor Snape about this." "Feel free," Sirius replied nonchalantly, gesturing for Malfoy to take his seat. As Malfoy sat down, he couldn't resist a parting shot at Harry. "Your godfather really has your back, doesn't he, Potter? Run and tattle some more." Harry shot back. "Shut up, Malfoy." "Disrupting classroom discipline. That's another 5 points from Slytherin," Sirius announced, effectively silencing Malfoy's retort. The Slytherins glared at Sirius, while the Gryffindors looked on with admiration. For too long, they felt, Snape had unfairly targeted them. Now, it seemed, the tables had turned. John watched the exchange with narrowed eyes, pondering the implications. Was this the beginning of Sirius's downfall? It seemed that the balance of power within Hogwarts was shifting, and only time would tell what consequences would arise from Sirius's bold actions. Sirius Black, a war hero renowned for his valor against the Dark Lord, was an ideal candidate for the Defense Against the Dark Arts professorship at Hogwarts. His first-hand experience battling Voldemort and the Death Eaters, coupled with his academic excellence during his own time at Hogwarts, made him more than qualified for the role. John observed Sirius with a sly half-smile, lounging back in his chair with an air of casual indifference. He found Sirius's approach to the class intriguing, especially since the curriculum included advanced techniques like the silent spellcasting that Oz had mentioned the previous year. "Today, you'll be divided into 2 groups," Sirius announced, diving straight into the lesson. "One group will attempt to cast spells silently, while the other will defend, also without speaking." The class quickly escalated into a competitive frenzy, with Draco Malfoy leading the charge against Harry Potter, taunting, "Potter, are you going to hide behind your godfather?" Harry, with fire in his eyes, chose Malfoy as his opponent, setting the stage for a heated duel. The Gryffindors, previously buoyant, found themselves under siege as Slytherins, led by Malfoy, launched a full-scale assault. Even Hermione Granger was challenged by Daphne Greengrass, though she managed to impress Sirius with her defensive skills, earning Gryffindor some points. However, Sirius's strict scoring, rewarding and penalizing students with points for their performance, turned the class into a high-stakes battle. Malfoy managed to disarm Harry without a word from Sirius, but when he resorted to a jinx, Slytherin was penalized. Throughout this, John remained a silent observer, his presence alone deterring anyone from challenging him. Sirius, recognizing John's unique status, finally addressed him. "Wick, it seems you believe you've mastered this skill." "You could say that," John replied with a confident smile, his casual demeanor silencing the room. He proposed a challenge to Sirius. "Let's see if I can pass the silent spell test. If I succeed, I earn the right to freedom in class from now on." The audacity of John's challenge left the students in awe. Direct confrontations with professors were unheard of, save for a notable exception in the 4th year. It seemed Sirius's point deductions against Slytherin had provoked John into action. The class watched in anticipation as John, without uttering a single incantation, conjured a spell of lightning that carved through the air, leaving a trail of shattered stone in its wake. Sirius, taken aback by the display, prepared himself for a counterattack, drawing his wand with a grave expression. "I only respect those who earn it," John declared, his spell not just a demonstration of skill but a statement of defiance. Sirius, now fully engaged, responded with a spell of his own, but John's initial strike had already set the tone. The duel between them was not just a test of magical prowess, but a clash of wills, with John asserting his dominance not as a student, but as a formidable wizard in his own right. The tingling sensation at the tip of his wand and the grimace on his face were clear indicators to Sirius that he had been bested in their recent exchange. Determined to reclaim his standing, Sirius launched a counterattack with all his might. A bolt of red light, laced with streaks of lightning, shot from his wand towards John. However, with a mere flick of his wand, John effortlessly summoned a bright silver shield that flashed into existence, deflecting the attack and leaving Sirius to marvel at the display. What a brilliant use of the iron armor charm, Sirius couldn't help but admit, his heart sinking slightly at the realization. The strength John exhibited was astonishing, far beyond what one would expect from a mere student. Yet, what truly astounded Sirius was not just the power behind the iron armor charm, but the proficiency with which John had cast it silently. Such skill in silent spellcasting was something Sirius had only observed in the likes of Voldemort and Dumbledore. With a complicated look, Sirius acknowledged, "Excellent silent spellcasting. 5 points to Slytherin." Despite his reluctance, the mastery John had shown was deserving of recognition, and even Sirius felt compelled to commend him. John responded with a slight smile, turning on his heel and departing with an air of grace. His actions spoke volumes, demonstrating that the true value of this class to him lay solely in its relevance to the final year's exams. This sentiment, given his display of skill, would not be questioned by anyone, not even the professors. Chapter 433, Snape on Strike. The Defense Against the Dark Arts class had just concluded, much to the displeasure of the Slytherin house. As the students filed out, Draco Malfoy cornered Harry Potter, his sneer as evident as ever. "That was quite the performance, Potter," he taunted. Harry, wary of Malfoy's intentions, retorted, "What are you getting at, Malfoy?" The tension between them was palpable, stemming from an earlier confrontation where spells were recklessly exchanged. Sirius Black had intervened, but not before Slytherin was penalized 5 points due to Malfoy's actions, effectively nullifying the points John had earned for their house. This left Slytherin at the bottom of the house points tally, a position they were unaccustomed to. Malfoy, content with leaving a parting sneer, departed, leaving Harry to ponder the encounter. Later, in the Great Hall, Malfoy boasted about his encounter with Harry, particularly about casting a tap-dancing jinx on him. John, meanwhile, was lost in thought over his peculiar egg-fried rice. Daphne Greengrass, known for her composure, seemed on edge, a clear sign to those who knew her well that she was far from pleased. Both Daphne and John were top students, evenly matched in their academic prowess. However, the limitations of nonverbal spells meant that neither could gain the upper hand in their magical duels. "Daphne, are you planning to skip Defense Against the Dark Arts?" John inquired, after a moment of contemplation. "Not just Defense Against the Dark Arts," John replied, his decision surprising even Malfoy. "I'll be attending fewer classes in general." Malfoy, taken aback, realized the weight of responsibility now resting on his shoulders. "So, the future of Slytherin rests with you," John remarked, half-jokingly, as he glanced at the house points hourglass. "Let's maintain the honor of Slytherin." Malfoy felt a surge of determination, bolstered by John's words. "Especially you, Draco. Try not to lose too many points," John advised, though his tone suggested he wouldn't hold it against Malfoy if he did. "After all, we are Slytherins." The afternoon brought with it 2 potions classes, a subject where Malfoy hoped to redeem Slytherin's lost points. In the dungeon classroom, a small group had gathered, a testament to Professor Snape's notoriously strict teaching style. Alongside Malfoy and Daphne were Blaise Zabini, Theodore Nott, and Pansy Parkinson, among others. Hufflepuff's Ernie Macmillan was also present, sharing tales of John's exploits. Upon Harry's arrival, Malfoy greeted him with a malicious grin. "Welcome to my domain," he sneered, alluding to Snape's penchant for deducting points from Gryffindor. Harry bristled at the comment, while Ron Weasley lamented their impending doom under Snape's scrutiny. Harry defended Sirius, though he couldn't help but worry about the potential repercussions of Snape's bias. As they stewed in their apprehension, the dungeon door swung open, revealing not Snape, but Horace Slughorn. "Professor Snape is otherwise engaged, so I'll be taking over," Slughorn announced, his tone light despite the awkwardness of the situation. The students were taken aback, but Slughorn seemed pleased to step in. It wasn't the first time he had served as a substitute, and he approached the task with a sense of enthusiasm that was a stark contrast to Snape's usual demeanor. Slughorn, the former head of Slytherin and potions master, returned to teaching with a keen interest, particularly intrigued by the potential of a certain student in his new class. As the students entered the steam-filled classroom, an array of peculiar scents wafted through the air, marking a departure from the past. Slughorn's eyes scanned the group, searching for someone. His surprise was palpable when he realized John was absent. "Why isn't John here?" he exclaimed, unable to hide his disbelief. John had not attended the class, despite having chosen potions, a decision that had significantly influenced Slughorn's eagerness to teach again. The students exchanged confused glances until Malfoy explained, "John has enrolled in many courses and is currently preoccupied with preparing for his research." Slughorn, reassured by this explanation, dismissed the concern with a wave of his hand, much to Ron's astonishment. Ron whispered to Harry, questioning if they could also skip classes without consequence. Hermione, however, quickly silenced him, reminding him that such leniency was reserved for those with significant achievements like the Medal of Merlin. Harry's curiosity about John's research sparked a sharp rebuke from Hermione, who accused him of suspecting John of nefarious activities. Despite Harry's casual intent, Hermione's protective stance was clear. As the class settled, the Slytherins grouped together, while Harry, Ron, and Hermione took seats near a golden cauldron that emitted an enticing aroma. Slughorn's teaching style, filled with interactive elements, contrasted sharply with Snape's. The students were captivated by the scents emanating from the cauldrons, each identifying different and familiar smells that stirred their emotions and memories. Slughorn instructed the students to prepare for the lesson, prompting Harry to admit his lack of textbooks. He explained his attendance was due to the requirement for an Auror certification, a goal that necessitated a change in Snape's previously stringent prerequisites for the class. Slughorn, unfazed, directed Harry and Ron to a storage cabinet filled with old textbooks and tools. The two friends found themselves competing for the better-conditioned book, a struggle that ended with Ron's victory due to his physical advantage. This moment of levity underscored their enduring friendship and rivalry, even amidst the challenges of their education and the unfolding mysteries surrounding them. Forced to accept the old book, Harry couldn't hide his frustration. "I'm sorry, my friend, but I need the new book." "You can have the old one," Ron declared with a sense of triumph. Clenching his teeth in irritation, Harry collected another set of scales and some potion ingredients before they both returned to their workstations. Professor Slughorn, seemingly indifferent to the minor squabble, stood at the front of the classroom, his demeanor cheerful. "Today, I've prepared a variety of potions to broaden your horizons. Naturally, this is just for educational purposes," he began, his voice filled with enthusiasm. "By the end of this advanced class, you should be capable of concocting potions similar to these." He gestured towards a cauldron near the Slytherin table, which contained a potion resembling clear water, and asked, "Can anyone identify this potion?" Instantly, two hands shot up, one from the Slytherin table and another from the Gryffindor side. The owners of the hands, two girls, exchanged a charged glance, as if an invisible spark had ignited between them. "Let's keep it civil, Miss Greengrass. You may answer," Slughorn said, momentarily wondering if the spark was a figment of his imagination. Daphne Greengrass, with a hint of pride, glanced at Hermione Granger, who had not been called upon, and confidently stated, "That's Veritaserum, a colorless and odorless potion that compels the drinker to speak the truth." "Excellent, excellent," Slughorn exclaimed, visibly pleased with Daphne's answer. He then directed the class's attention to a second cauldron. "This next one is quite well known," he began, but before he could finish, hands were raised again. After a brief moment of consideration, Slughorn once again chose Daphne. "It's Polyjuice Potion. By adding a person's hair to it, the drinker can assume their appearance," she explained. "Brilliant, brilliant!" Slughorn was on the verge of applauding when he turned his attention to a third cauldron, this one shimmering gold. Without waiting for him to ask, both hands were raised yet again. This time, after a moment's hesitation, he decided to give someone else a chance and pointed at Hermione. "It's Amortentia, the most powerful love potion in the world," she responded with renewed vigor, having been overlooked previously. "Indeed, it appears there's no need for further questions," Slughorn remarked, clearly intrigued by Hermione. "You recognized it by its distinctive mother-of-pearl sheen? And its unique spiral of steam," Hermione added, her enthusiasm evident. "Plus, its scent varies according to what each person finds most appealing." She hesitated for a moment before continuing. "To me, it smells like strawberry ice cream, fresh parchment, and—" Her voice trailed off, leaving the sentence hanging. Impressed by Hermione's knowledge and passion, Slughorn inquired about her name, signaling the beginning of a new respect for her abilities. Chapter 434, The Strongest Doorman in History. "Hermione Granger, Professor," Harry introduced, sparking immediate interest in Slughorn due to the surname's association with the founder of the Extraordinary Apothecaries Association. However, Slughorn's curiosity was soon quelled when he learned that Hermione's family was of Muggle origin, unlike the wizarding lineage he had in mind. Despite this, Slughorn showed no disappointment. Instead, he greeted the revelation with a smile, demonstrating his lack of prejudice towards Hermione's background. "Ah, I recall you mentioning a good friend who is Muggle-born and also boasts some of the best grades in our year. That must be Miss Granger, correct? Slughorn inquired, his interest piqued, perhaps seeing an opportunity to add another exceptional student to his collection of talented individuals. Yes, Professor, Harry confirmed, understanding Slughorn's intentions. Very well, then. Let's add 20 points to Miss Greengrass of Slytherin for her excellence, and the same goes for the outstanding Miss Granger, Slughorn announced generously, his actions reinforcing the welcoming atmosphere he fostered, especially towards his female students. With a grin, Slughorn shifted the topic to the lesson at hand. Of course, it's important to remember that love potions cannot truly create love. They can only induce an intense obsession or infatuation, making them among the most dangerous and powerful concoctions in this classroom. As he spoke, he sealed the potion's container, causing the alluring scents to dissipate, and declared it was time to begin the class. However, Slughorn deliberately avoided discussing the contents of the fourth cauldron, sparking curiosity among the students. Ernie Macmillan, unable to contain his curiosity, pointed to the last black cauldron and asked about its contents. The potion within sparkled like molten gold, with droplets dancing on its surface, yet never spilling over. Slughorn, pleased that his tactic to whet the student's appetite for knowledge had worked, playfully asked, "Who can tell me what this is?" To his surprise, an additional hand was raised this time, belonging to Draco Malfoy. Malfoy? Slughorn expressed his surprise before Malfoy confidently identified the potion as the elixir of felicity. Intrigued, Slughorn pressed Malfoy on how he came to know of such a rare potion. Malfoy, slightly embarrassed, mentioned that John had possessed it, quickly covering his discomfort with a cough. Slughorn was astounded. It's remarkable. The elixir of felicity isn't available for purchase anywhere. Did he brew it himself? Yes, Malfoy confirmed. He crafted it himself and described it as a potion of luck. I should have expected as much. John's talents make the extraordinary seem ordinary, Slughorn remarked, impressed. He then awarded Slytherin 10 points for Malfoy's correct answer. Slughorn explained the complexity of brewing the elixir of felicity and the disastrous consequences of any errors. However, if brewed successfully, it would render any endeavor successful for the duration of its effects. Terry Boot of Ravenclaw, intrigued, asked why people wouldn't want to consume it constantly. Slughorn turned the question to Malfoy, asking him to explain the risks of overdosing. Malfoy detailed the adverse effects, including dizziness, recklessness, and a dangerous sense of invincibility. Pleased with Malfoy's response, Slughorn awarded Slytherin additional points, effectively restoring the points they had lost earlier in defense against the dark arts. Slughorn shared his personal experience with the elixir of felicity, recounting the 2 happiest days of his life thanks to the potion. With the students' interest at its peak, he revealed a small bottle of the elixir as a prize for the class, further motivating them to engage with the lesson. The students were all holding their breath, their eyes fixed on the small bottle that Professor Slughorn had placed on his desk. This was exactly the kind of anticipation Slughorn aimed to create with his unique approach to teaching. Please turn to page 10 of Advanced Potion Making, he announced, his voice echoing through the classroom. We have just over an hour to brew the draught of living death. The student who brews the best potion will win this vial of Felix Felicis. With that, the students sprang into action. Daphne Greengrass approached Draco Malfoy with a question that had been nagging at her. How do you know the consequences of overdosing on Felix Felicis? She inquired, her curiosity piqued. Malfoy, with his usual air of indifference, replied, Don't you remember? In our second year, John overdosed on it and ended up confessing to Snape, thinking he was drinking poison. Daphne, who had been preoccupied with Tom Riddle's diary at the time, wasn't sure about the details. She wondered why Malfoy would bring up such a dark story about John, risking potential retribution. Meanwhile, John had decided to seek out Hagrid for some potion ingredients. As he approached Hagrid's hut, he stopped in his tracks. There, standing before him, was none other than Albus Dumbledore, who had just opened the door. John, shouldn't you be in potions class right now? Dumbledore asked kindly, his eyes twinkling behind his half-moon glasses. Why are you here, Dumbledore? John asked, raising an eyebrow. Oh, right, you're still staying at the school. Yes, Horace is concerned about external threats, Dumbledore explained. He thought I might be of some help. Just then, Hagrid emerged, surprised to see John. Did you know? Professor Dumbledore has been staying at the school, acting as a sort of guardian. Quite remarkable, don't you think? John responded dryly. Yes, Hogwarts is indeed fortunate to have the greatest wizard of the century as its gatekeeper. The conversation shifted as John requested some potion ingredients from Hagrid, who promptly set off for the Forbidden Forest, leaving John alone with Dumbledore. John, eyeing Dumbledore's singed beard, couldn't resist commenting, I thought you'd be off chasing Grindelwald, Dumbledore. Dumbledore sighed. We need to focus on protecting the school. Or is it Harry you're really concerned about? John countered skeptically. Dumbledore's gaze deepened. What are your intentions, John? John dismissed the question with a cold laugh. You know very well my stance on certain matters, Dumbledore. If you're truly free, why not confront him directly, as you did in 1945? John suggested, his tone laced with disappointment. Dumbledore simply replied, I trust you, John. John left shortly after, not wanting to linger in Dumbledore's presence any longer. Back in the classroom, Harry Potter was also vying for the Felix Felicis. He struggled with the instructions in advanced potion-making, which were obscured by the previous owner's scribbles. Amidst the chaos of the classroom, Harry stumbled upon a helpful note. Squeeze with the side of a silver knife for easier extraction. Deciding to give it a try, Harry was surprised by the effectiveness of the tip. As he worked on his potion, he couldn't help but wonder about the mysterious previous owner of his textbook, whose advice might just lead him to win the coveted bottle of Felix Felicis. In the margin of the ancient potion book, a line of distinct handwriting caught the eye. It read, Manually twisting the drowsy grass rhizome enhances its potency. Incorporating just one additional drop into the cauldron can significantly amplify the decoction's effectiveness. This note, seemingly a small and inconsequential addition, held the promise of transforming an ordinary potion into something far more powerful. The meticulous detail suggested a deep understanding of potion making, hinting at the writer's expertise and careful experimentation. It was a testament to the complexity and nuance of the magical craft, where even the slightest adjustments could yield remarkable results. Chapter 435, The Mysterious Old Man Next Door to the Kunching Club. Harry noticed that the two sets of handwriting on the potion recipe were distinctly different, but he didn't dwell on the oddity. Instead, he focused on the task at hand, finding that squeezing the side of the silver dagger as suggested made the process easier. This discovery bolstered his confidence, and he proceeded to follow the second line of instructions, which involved extracting juice from sleepy grass. Despite his initial hesitation, the addition of the juice didn't alter the potion significantly, yet it wasn't ruined either. Step by step, Harry meticulously followed the instructions. When time was up, Professor Slughorn instructed everyone to cease their stirring and began to inspect each student's work. He moved between the tables, occasionally sniffing or stirring the potions. To no one's surprise, Daphne Greengrass had achieved the highest degree of completion, even surpassing Hermione Granger. Draco Malfoy's potion, on the other hand, resembled jelly, much to his dismay. Daphne, noticing Slughorn's impressed expression, couldn't help but glance towards Hermione, her eyes gleaming with pride. Hermione, looking disheveled and out of her element, could only watch. Finally, Slughorn approached Harry's cauldron. The potion within was as dark as ink. Tentatively, Slughorn dropped a leaf into the concoction, which disappeared instantly. Perfect, he exclaimed, the undisputed winner. I guarantee one drop of this could put 1,000 people to sleep, making it 10 times more effective than the standard potion. He looked at Harry with newfound admiration. Excellent, Harry. You've clearly inherited your mother's talent. No, he corrected himself, considering the potion's enhanced effect, you possess Lily's ingenuity, but with a flexibility she never had. True to his word, Slughorn presented Harry with a bottle of Felix Felicis. Use it well, he advised, as Harry accepted the potion, a smile spreading across his face, especially upon noticing Malfoy's annoyance. Malfoy, trying to downplay his envy, remarked, It's just Felix Felicis. I had John get me a bottle. Daphne, overhearing this, wondered when Malfoy had started referring to his father as John instead of Dad. Ignoring Malfoy's comment, Daphne mentioned that they were expected at the Quunxing Club for Astoria's second visit. Malfoy, momentarily distracted, earned a sharp reprimand from Daphne for using a nickname she disliked. As Harry was bombarded with questions from Ron about the potion, Daphne and Malfoy left for the club, soon running into Astoria. She was visibly excited, adorned with a star badge and looking her best, having used Silverhand's new shampoo and meticulously groomed herself. Daphne complimented her sister's appearance, and the trio made their way to the club. Upon reaching the 4th floor, they were puzzled to find John standing outside an unfamiliar office, seemingly unsure of what to do. "John?" Malfoy asked, confused. "Why aren't you going in?" John, equally perplexed, pointed out the unexpected appearance of the office. Daphne and Malfoy looked on in surprise, wondering what mystery awaited them inside this new, unexplained space next to the Quunxing Club. The room adjacent to the Stars Club had recently undergone a name change. The Gatekeeper's office? Malfoy's eyes widened in surprise. Since when did this exist? The concept of a gatekeeper was unfamiliar to them. "Let's not dwell on that," John suggested, casting a lingering glance at the office before heading towards the Stars Club. "Where's Neville?" "He'll be a bit delayed," Malfoy replied with a smirk. "Seems he's feeling under the weather." As they stood before the club's door, John and Daphne made no move to enter. All eyes turned to Astoria, who, filled with anticipation, cautiously approached. The magical eye on the door inspected her, but remained silent, not triggering any alarm. With a gentle push, Astoria opened the door. To anyone not a member of the Stars Club, the room would appear old and neglected. However, as Astoria entered, the space transformed into a breathtaking scene illuminated by dim stars. Golden runes floated through the air like enchanted elves, while clouds and mist danced across the domed ceiling, occasionally pierced by the golden script. Astoria, mesmerized, reached out to touch the golden text. As her fingers grazed the words, they turned into golden particles and drifted towards the round table. "It's truly magnificent," she murmured, her confusion giving way to awe. At that moment, all the words transformed into golden particles, converging on the round table where tiny golden figures assembled and began to tap dance. The sight nearly overwhelmed Astoria with its beauty. When John and the others entered, the golden figures hopped off the table and lined the aisle, welcoming them. "Is it just me, or are there more doors now?" Malfoy blinked in disbelief. The Stars Club, once a single room, now boasted 9 additional doors. "You're seeing correctly. There are indeed more doors," John confirmed. He approached one and opened it, revealing a jungle-like environment. "You've brought the forest inside?" Malfoy asked, puzzled by the unexpected setting. John closed the door and reopened it, this time revealing an elegantly furnished room. "How did you manage this?" Astoria asked, amazed. "Just a little magic," John replied with a modest smile, then announced louder, "I'm going to hide something in one of these 9 doors." Neville, arriving late, was equally astonished by the new additions. Curiously, he opened a door, only to be greeted by a rush of water that soaked him completely. As they welcomed the new members and celebrated with golden wine, Astoria's cheeks flushed from her first taste of the unique beverage. John mused that the Greengrass family must not indulge in alcohol often, given the sisters' reactions. Suddenly, a knock sounded. Malfoy glanced from his wineglass to the door, asking, "Am I so drunk that I'm hearing things?" "You're not drunk," John assured him, as Astoria, in a daze, opened the door to reveal a figure with a scorched black beard. Looking up, they saw the familiar half-moon glasses and the kind face of Albus Dumbledore. "Dumbledore," Astoria gasped, fully sobering at the sight. "Hello, Miss Greengrass." "I'm the old man next door," Dumbledore greeted, twinkling. Malfoy sprang to his feet, reaching for his wand, and Neville followed suit. John raised his hand to halt them, asking with a half-smile, "A fool's trick? Quite effective, wouldn't you say?" Dumbledore agreed with a nod. John approached, conjuring a crystal wine glass with a golden rim. As if by magic, the glass filled with golden liquid. "As a welcome to our new neighbor, let me offer you a toast, Mr. Gatekeeper." He extended the wine glass towards Dumbledore, inviting him to join their celebration. Raising his glass to Dumbledore, John chuckled lightly. "I hope you're not concerned about what I might have added to the wine." Of course not, Dumbledore replied with a warm smile. As I've mentioned, I trust you, John. The intensity of the atmosphere between the two was so palpable that Astoria felt compelled to quickly retreat indoors. She pressed a hand to her chest, her voice tinged with residual fear. That was terrifying. What's going on with John and Dumbledore? She was still in the dark about the developments involving her own organization, the Stars Society, the Ministry of Magic, and the Order of the Phoenix. John observed Dumbledore reaching for the wine glass, his actions seemingly affirming his trust. With a slight smile, John made the wine glass vanish from his hand, pondering aloud, "Such wine hardly seems fitting for the greatest wizard of our time." After a moment of contemplation, John's eyes lit up with realization. "Ah, I know exactly what would be worthy of the great Dumbledore." He lifted his left hand, and under the soft glow of starlight, a golden cup materialized, radiating a captivating light. The golden liquid it contained shimmered, distinctly different from the stars that had just been present. John offered the cup with a meaningful expression. "How about this?" He presented what could only be described as the holy grail of rejuvenation and immortality, a treasure that Voldemort had desperately sought but could never attain. Yet here it was, effortlessly conjured before Dumbledore. Chapter 436, The Fatal Temptation. The allure of returning to youth and achieving immortality is a temptation many pursue, akin to a person on the brink of death from thirst, glimpsing a bottomless oasis. Such a choice now lay before Albus Dumbledore, revered as a deity in the wizarding world. John, with a sly chuckle, took a step back, and with a bow presented the Holy Grail. "Great Wizard Dumbledore, please, partake in your wine of immortality." Just a sip, a mere taste, would allow Dumbledore to reclaim his youth and revisit his prime. He could return to a time of boundless energy, where all concerns, including the fear of there being no successor to his legacy, would vanish. The atmosphere tensed, as if time itself had paused, capturing the moment. Dumbledore gazed at the liquid symbolizing eternal life. After a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, he let out a soft chuckle and met John's gaze with a serene expression. "It's a very tempting offer indeed, but I still have a preference for mead." In resisting this temptation, Dumbledore demonstrated once again his unwavering integrity and the reason he remained an unassailable figure in the magical world. He chose not to succumb to the lure of eternal life, adhering to his principles and passing this profound test. John's grip on the Holy Grail relaxed, and the golden chalice slowly dissipated under Dumbledore's watchful eye. John's smile faded as he regarded Dumbledore with a mix of respect and pity. "You are a man of honor, yet also a fool, Dumbledore. Do you think Voldemort would have rejected such an opportunity? You've forsaken the chance to ascend to godhood, choosing instead the path of mortality." Whether Dumbledore declined out of fear of self-poisoning, or because of his inherently noble heart, he missed the opportunity to transcend humanity. Now, stripped of any pretense of divinity, he embraced his humanity fully. "I understand your motives, and you know my ambitions," John said, snapping his fingers. The crystal cup, adorned with gold and filled with stars, reappeared in his hand. Offering the wineglass to Dumbledore, John raised a toast. "To the inevitable end you will face, Dumbledore." Dumbledore accepted the glass with a smile and a twinkle in his eye. "Thank you for your toast." He drank the wine, and the golden stars transformed into a warm surge of magical power that flowed through him. Dumbledore had sustained injuries in his battles with Voldemort, and though he had recovered somewhat, the effects of this wine were akin to a week's rest. "A most refreshing beverage," Dumbledore remarked, visibly moved. "Sometimes simplicity is key," John replied, taking a sip of his own wine. "You don't always need extravagance, just purity." Dumbledore smiled. "I believe that's a sentiment worth recording in my notes. Now, if you'll excuse me." He rose, walking to the door, opening it, and then closing it gently behind him. John lingered at the door for a moment before turning to close the Star Club's door. "Dumbledore, you never cease to amaze," he mused, his gaze deep with unspoken thoughts. The true nature of their confrontation, a test of wills and ambitions, remained a secret to all but them. Were they adversaries or allies? Or perhaps they sought mutual benefit. The Star Club meeting concluded. Daphne returned home with her sister, while Malfoy and Neville's altercation in Malfoy's hair resembling a bird's nest, his quest for revenge unfulfilled. John, left alone, pondered over the ring. To become the guardian of the Holy Grail? He speculated that Dumbledore's decision to remain at the school, beyond nurturing and protecting Harry, was influenced by the presence of the Holy Grail. This unpredictable element disrupted the balance Dumbledore sought for the magical world. His vision was not one of immortality ruling over wizards or of wizards in conflict, but rather Dumbledore adhered to his own moral compass, rejecting extremism. John successfully passed Dumbledore's scrutiny. He had hidden the Holy Grail within Hogwarts, aiming to lure Voldemort into a trap. This plan was fraught with immense risk, potentially endangering the entire school. Therefore, Dumbledore's presence was crucial to oversee the operation. He was determined to prevent Voldemort from acquiring the Holy Grail, even if it meant employing the most minimal protective measures. From the moment John involved Dumbledore with the Holy Grail, he recognized the latter's unwavering commitment to peace. Dumbledore's principles were unbreakable. John's feelings towards Dumbledore were complex. Initially, there was admiration during his youth, which evolved into an ideal to strive for as he grew older. However, following a certain incident, resentment crept in, leading to calculated manipulations. John found himself capable of confronting Dumbledore and scheming to tarnish his reputation. He could strip Dumbledore of his honors, yet he found it impossible to directly harm him. Magic, in its essence, is driven by ideals, much like the intangible nature of love. Hatred, too, plays a crucial role in the fabric of magic. Dumbledore had not wronged John personally, making it impossible for John to truly defeat him without a direct provocation. This dynamic wasn't merely personal, it was the essence of magic at work. Just as Voldemort couldn't overcome the protective magic of Harry's mother's love, John couldn't breach the barrier of his own conflicted emotions towards Dumbledore. Magic, after all, is rooted in ideals. John's frustration with Dumbledore stemmed from his perceived inaction. Without transforming his anger into outright hatred, John felt handicapped in any confrontation. He expressed his frustration by slamming his fist on the table, lamenting the complexity of dealing with Dumbledore, especially when broader issues were at stake. Reflecting on recent developments, such as Slughorn's appointment and Sirius becoming a professor, John suspected Dumbledore's influence. Dumbledore was strategically positioning members of the Order of the Phoenix within Hogwarts, all while focusing on Harry's accelerated development. Despite these challenges, John believed he held the upper hand as long as he controlled the Holy Grail. "We have to prepare for war," he muttered to himself, pondering Narcissa's current situation. By sending Narcissa back to Voldemort, regardless of Voldemort's trust in her, John aimed to exploit the situation to gather intelligence. Narcissa's role was pivotal, as demonstrated when Bellatrix, through Narcissa's information, managed to confront Malfoy and seize the badge. John mused over the choices facing Voldemort, comparing them to those Dumbledore faced. However, he quickly corrected himself. Voldemort, driven by his fear of death, had no real choice. The Holy Grail represented an irresistible lure. Time was not on Voldemort's side, especially with John's rapidly growing power. John's prowess, evident during the Battle of the Ministry of Magic, was a clear threat to Voldemort. Unlike Dumbledore, John lacked the patience for leniency. With the support of Johnny Silverhand and the Ministry of Magic, Voldemort's hiding places would eventually be uncovered. Voldemort, John surmised, would opt for a direct confrontation rather than face inevitable defeat. John was confident in this assessment. As he contemplated the strategic game unfolding among the three powers, he knew that timing and deception would be key. "When the moment is right, I'll need to find a reason to vanish," John planned, aware that rumors and Narcissa's reports would only fuel Voldemort's ambitions. The intricate dance of power continued, with each player exerting their utmost effort. John was a man of his word, always honoring his commitments. John was known for his unwavering commitment to his word. If he declared he would skip a class, he would do just that. Conversely, if he promised to attend, he would not only be present but also punctually so. His presence was noted in several classes, including Transfiguration and Charms, and occasionally in Herbology. However, the place where John was most frequently found was in the care of magical creatures class. By the second week, Hagrid had grown increasingly anxious, eagerly awaiting John's arrival for the class. When the time finally came, John arrived exactly as he had promised, much to Hagrid's relief. "Brilliant, John. Let's head over to see Grop," Hagrid announced, ready to lead John to Grop as soon as the class commenced. John was momentarily taken aback. "Hagrid, aren't we supposed to have a class first?" he inquired, puzzled by Hagrid's plan. Hagrid looked at him with a bemused expression. "With your level of knowledge, you could graduate right now," he remarked. "All right," John replied, a hint of resignation in his voice. "But let's frame it differently. We're not skipping class. We're broadening our horizons." Hagrid nodded in agreement, finding John's perspective reasonable. Together, they made their way to see Grop. True to his word, John had prepared a special gift for Grop, a rubber frisbee and a complete set of educational toys, all crafted by John himself. He had even installed a blackboard in the cave to help Grop learn to read. John's thoughtful preparations for Grop highlighted his dedication not only to his studies, but also to the well-being of magical creatures. His actions demonstrated a deep understanding of the importance of education, even in the most unconventional settings. Chapter 437, The Second Handwriting. After Harry acquired the advanced potion-making textbook, it felt like a miracle had unfolded before him. However, this development did not sit well with Hermione and Ron. Hermione's discontent stemmed from her belief that Harry was resorting to cheating, while Ron was frustrated because he struggled to decipher the handwriting in the book, which hindered his academic performance. During this time, the book also became a target for Ginny and Hermione, particularly Ginny, who was immediately reminded of Tom Riddle's diary upon hearing that Harry was following instructions from a notebook. The duo managed to snatch the book and promptly used magic to inspect it for any enchantments. However, they discovered that the book was not magical. Its only notable feature was the annotations scribbled throughout its pages. Owing to an overwhelming amount of homework, Harry had not had the chance to thoroughly examine the book. Yet, a cursory glance revealed that nearly every page contained two distinct sets of handwriting. One set aimed to correct the methods outlined in the textbook, while the other sought to enhance the potion's effectiveness. On a Saturday, Harry, lounging on the sofa in the common room, pondered aloud to Hermione, "Who could the half-blood prince be?" Hermione, visibly annoyed, replied, "It could be a woman, or perhaps a girl. The handwriting doesn't seem masculine to me." "But the name is Half-Blood Prince," Harry countered after a moment of reflection. Hermione, momentarily at a loss for words, frowned and said, "So, this book had two owners?" She examined Harry's book closely, scrutinizing the different handwriting styles. "I don't recognize either," she admitted, though the second style seemed vaguely familiar. Glancing at the clock, Harry hastily said, "It's almost 8. I need to hurry." He was eager to retrieve his book as he had an appointment with Dumbledore. Unbeknownst to them, Dumbledore had taken on the role of gatekeeper, a fact relayed to them by Sirius. Harry's spirits were high, partly due to Sirius's presence at the school, allowing for frequent father-son interactions. Ron, after some hesitation, invited Hermione. "Are you heading to the library?" "No," Hermione replied, standing up. "I still have to finish my runes homework." Disappointed by her response, Ron watched as she ascended the stairs. Despite being in their 6th year, which had fewer classes, the trio found themselves buried under a mountain of homework. In the Great Hall, the Slytherin house points were visibly increasing, now on par with Gryffindor's. "Snape hasn't been seen in weeks," Malfoy complained. "How much longer must we endure Potter's showboating? He's always wanted to teach defense against the dark arts," John remarked nonchalantly while stirring his porridge. "He would have been a good fit." "And yet, Professor Slughorn chose someone else, the person he despises the most," John added, suggesting that if Snape could tolerate the situation, Dumbledore might intervene on his behalf. Slughorn's sporadic appearances in potions classes hinted at his potential permanent role as potions master, especially given his interest in Harry's exceptional performance. "I recall his potions grades being mediocre," Malfoy sneered. "He must have consumed Felix Felicis. Even a blind cat can find a dead rat." Eagerly, Malfoy looked at John, hoping for a bottle of the lucky potion. John, with a glance, replied, "Win the house cup, and I'll give you a bottle." "It's a deal," Malfoy agreed instantly. After lunch, John handed Daphne the translated Advanced Runes text, which he had personally translated. He then made his way to the headmaster's office, crossing paths with Harry and Ron, who were en route to the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom. "Harry?" Ron called out, noticing Harry's hesitation. Harry, watching John's departure, murmured, "He's headed to the headmaster's office." Ron called out to Harry twice more before Harry finally snapped out of his daze. After a moment of hesitation, he and Ron made their way to the Defense Against the Dark Arts office. Meanwhile, John had already bypassed the gargoyle guarding the entrance and stepped into the headmaster's office, which had undergone significant changes since Dumbledore's tenure. The floor was now covered with soft carpets, and instead of attending to his teaching duties, Slughorn was found indulging in pineapple compote. "Oh, John!" Slughorn exclaimed, his face lighting up at the sight of John seeking him out. He generously offered some of the pineapple preserves to John. Ambrosio Froome's confections always hit the spot, and his candy box is quite the hit. Slughorn retrieved an octagonal red gift box from his drawer, gave it a slight twist, and revealed 8 different snacks. He selected a chocolate ball and handed it to John with the tenderness one might use to handle delicate ceramics. Slughorn didn't need to inquire about the purpose of John's visit. He was simply pleased that John had come. "I was a bit disappointed not to see you in potions," Slughorn mentioned. "You must be deeply engrossed in your research, aren't you?" "Yes, Professor," John replied, taking a bite of the chocolate ball, which oozed syrup from its center. He smiled and added, "Do you recall the question I asked on the train?" "That was a thought-provoking question," Slughorn remarked with genuine interest. "Are you pursuing that experiment?" "But my boy, the subject of that experiment is as controversial as a blood curse." Slughorn hoped to persuade John to consider a different research topic, given that the study of blood curses was far less appealing than, say, werewolves. John shook his head, explaining, "This research isn't about seeking popularity, it's about the pursuit of knowledge." Slughorn was momentarily taken aback by John's words. "I'm here to invite the professor to collaborate on this experiment, much like I did with Alex Dharma." John's invitation surprised Slughorn, but the prospect of mentoring such a talented student warmed his heart. After some contemplation, he agreed, recognizing the potential benefits of the project, including its capacity to heal. When John exited the headmaster's office, classes had already ended. Harry, upon seeing John again, found himself momentarily distracted, failing to notice Hermione speaking to him. "Harry!" Hermione called out, snapping him back to attention. "What?" Harry responded, finally noticing her. Hermione sighed, feeling a mix of frustration and affection. "We need to talk to Hagrid," she said, referring to Hagrid's noticeable absence during breakfast on Saturday. "There's a Quidditch trial this morning," Ron interjected, eager to discuss their charms class assignment on the Clearwater Curse. "But what exactly do we need to explain to Hagrid?" "We can't just tell him we dislike his course," Ron added, not fully grasping the situation. "We don't hate it," Hermione countered, her voice firm. "That's what you said, but I haven't forgotten the incident with the snails," Ron replied, his tone darkening. "We barely escaped last time. If we had stayed, we'd probably be teaching Glop how to tie his shoes by now." Hermione found herself at a loss for words. Hagrid's inability to discern the needs of his students from those of half-giants was a recurring issue. "I don't want to fall out with Hagrid," she admitted, her voice tinged with sadness. "Then let's wait until after the Quidditch trials," Harry suggested, trying to offer some comfort. He, too, missed Hagrid, but shared Ron's sentiment that avoiding Glop would be for the best, especially with the Quidditch trials scheduled for the morning. "The trials have attracted a large number of applicants. It might take the entire morning to select the team," Harry said, his nerves evident. As the new captain, this was his first major challenge. "I can't understand why the team suddenly became so popular." "Come on, Harry," Hermione said, her impatience showing. "It's not Quidditch that's popular, it's you. You've never been more popular, and you are now. They're all here because of you." Her words struck a chord with Harry, making him feel unexpectedly self-conscious. Just then, Malfoy entered the Great Hall, his presence adding tension to the air. "Ah, if it isn't the savior of the world," Malfoy sneered, approaching Harry. "Have you figured out how to cry into the arms of—" The narrative paused as Malfoy's taunt hung in the air, setting the stage for another confrontation between him and Harry. "Will you run crying to your godfather after losing the game?" Malfoy sneered, imitating Harry's voice. "Or will your godfather weep alongside you?" This time, Harry's patience nearly snapped, and he almost lunged at Malfoy to retaliate. Chapter 438, Gryffindor's New Keeper. In the end, Harry didn't confront Malfoy, as his teammates intervened, pulling him away. The memory of last semester's suspension still haunted the players, instilling a sense of caution. Moreover, they were all too aware of Harry's previous inability to best Malfoy in their confrontations. "Right, that is it," Malfoy taunted relentlessly, his words dripping with malice. "Baby Potter is back in his godfather's arms." His sneer was so vicious that the teammates holding Harry momentarily loosened their grip. Thankfully, a more seasoned member of the group shouted, "Do you want to lose your seeker?" This spurred everyone into action, and they redoubled their efforts to drag Harry away. When John arrived on the scene, he found Harry being carried off, still stubbornly kicking in Malfoy's direction. "What happened?" John inquired, noticing the other Gryffindors' angry glares directed at Malfoy. "It's nothing. Just sent Potter back to his godfather's arms," Malfoy replied with a feigned innocence, adding, "Harry Potter is still a good baby, after all." "Draco, just a piece of advice. Make sure you always carry your wand with you," John said, half-jokingly concerned that Malfoy's knack for provocation might one day land him in serious trouble. As they sat down, John asked about the day's schedule. "The tryouts?" he inquired. "This afternoon," Malfoy responded, clearly annoyed. Gryffindor claimed the morning slot, arguing they had too many participants. John wasn't surprised. Harry's fame had significantly boosted Gryffindor Quidditch's popularity, drawing crowds eager to witness the savior in action. As they continued their breakfast, Professor Flitwick, the only staff member present in the auditorium, was barely visible due to his small stature. Malfoy, curious about John's recent activities, remarked on his frequent absences. "Just some simple tasks," John replied nonchalantly. "I'm working on repairing Neville's weapon." Following the battle at the Ministry of Magic, Neville had fully embraced his talent as a swordmaster. His sword, Marvolo, had been damaged, and John was committed to forging a new one for him. Malfoy had considered using a sword like John's, but realized it would diminish rather than enhance his abilities. After breakfast, John returned to the Star Club, passing the administrator's office, which was closed. "They've really taken that fool's plan to the extreme," he thought to himself. Inside the Star Club, John opened the armory beneath the round table, revealing a vast workshop. Here, he had crafted numerous pieces of equipment, including the broken sword of Marvolo. Despite its quality, it paled in comparison to the genuine sword of Gryffindor. As John pondered the runes on his own sword, inspiration struck. Flames roared to life in the forge, and a red-hot sword embryo began to take shape under his hammer. The heat was barely noticeable against his skin as he picked up the glowing embryo. "I grant you the power to sever magic and coat you in mithril," John intoned, his voice echoing with ancient authority. "I bestow upon you the ability to summon flames and infuse you with dragon's teeth. I give you the strength to protect, wrapped in the heart of oak." As he spoke, the sword embryo was enveloped in mithril, transforming into a gleaming silver blade adorned with mysterious patterns resembling ancient text. John then retrieved a box filled with a special powder from his bag. The powder settled onto the sword, muting its bright sheen. A unique black-gold texture emerged along the blade, a result of a new material that mimicked the effects of magical runes, created through the transmutative powers of the Philosopher's Stone. With the final step complete, the black golden sword lay quietly on the table, its 3 distinctive marks glowing softly, a testament to John's craftsmanship and magical prowess. John carefully picked up the sword, feeling its weight settle comfortably in his grip. After a couple of practice swings, he nodded in satisfaction. As about to place it into a small bag for Neville, when a thought struck him. "I almost forgot. This sword can sever magic," he mused aloud. Concerned that the sword's magic severing ability might damage the bag, John decided to craft a scabbard from cherry wood to safely house the blade. With the sword now securely encased, he left the armory, pondering the enchantment process he had used. It's similar to the method of blessing with a true name, he thought, stroking his chin. The key is to deeply understand the magic you want to imbue the weapon with. For instance, I branded this sword with a fire spell. As noon approached, John encountered Malfoy, who seemed unusually pleased with himself. You'd never guess how thrilling the Gryffindor tryouts were, Malfoy boasted, clearly hoping to provoke a reaction. John, uninterested in engaging with Malfoy's taunts, remained silent, prompting Malfoy to continue. They've replaced their keeper. That guy from the train, McLaggen, took over from Ron. Who? John asked, genuinely surprised. Ron didn't make the cut? Malfoy snickered. You should have seen it. McLaggen and Weasley both saved 5 goals, but they played a tiebreaker. Poor Weasley's hands were shaking so badly he let a goal through. John knew that Ron's struggles with nervousness and self-confidence were not new, but he hadn't expected McLaggen, known more for his arrogance than his skill, to outperform Ron under pressure. Yet Malfoy's detailed account raised suspicions. Did you go watch the tryouts? John inquired, eyeing Malfoy skeptically. No, Malfoy denied too quickly. Then, under John's penetrating gaze, he relented. All right, I was just looking for news. John couldn't help but smirk at the admission. His attention was then drawn to the Gryffindor table, where Ron was being consoled by Harry, and Hermione appeared guilt-ridden. What happened with Hermione? He asked, sensing there was more to the story. Malfoy, after a moment's thought, replied, I heard from Blaise that she accidentally bumped into Granger. What was she trying to do at the time? John recalled Blaise's infatuation with Ginny Weasley and his futile attempts to win her over, all of which Ginny had dismissed. Blaise's persistence, despite Ginny's clear disinterest and her relationship with Dean Thomas, reminded John of Blaise's peculiar views on love and courtship, influenced perhaps by his mother's numerous marriages. It turned out that Hermione had intended to cast a Confundus charm, but an accidental collision with Blaise disrupted her spell, inadvertently ensuring McLaggen's victory. This detail was new to John, who pondered the implications quietly. After Harry lost his savior status, it seems his friends have been facing a streak of bad luck, John reflected, considering the broader changes within their circle. The afternoon brought the Slytherin tryouts, which, in stark contrast to the morning's excitement at Gryffindor's, attracted little attention. Despite the lack of spectators, the Slytherin tryouts were not without their own drama. Malfoy stood at the center of the Quidditch pitch, exuding confidence, while Goyle and Crabbe hovered nearby, intimidating anyone who dared approach. To participate, Malfoy began, his voice dripping with disdain, understand this. We are Slytherins, and we do not entertain mediocrity. We seek only the elite. His words immediately sparked outrage among his housemates. What do you mean by that? Are you calling me trash? Protested a 7th-year Slytherin, his pride wounded. Hey, don't misunderstand, Malfoy hastily clarified, waving his hands in a gesture of innocence. I'm not singling anyone out. What I mean is, collectively, we've been underperforming. Everyone here needs to step up. Despite his attempt at clarification, the tension only escalated, with many Slytherins clenching their fists in anger, clearly thinking Malfoy deserved a lesson in respect. Slytherin has only one acceptable outcome, and that is to win the championship. Anything less is a disgrace to our name. Do you understand? Malfoy continued, his voice now laced with a fierce determination. We believe in the supremacy of strength. This field is reserved for those who possess the power and the courage to fight for victory. Timid cowards have no place among us. As Malfoy delivered his impassioned speech, a familiar figure stood among the crowd, unnoticed by him. Despite the initial hostility, Malfoy's words seemed to resonate with some, as the atmosphere shifted from one of indignation to a more reflective silence. After concluding his lecture, the selection process for Slytherin's team officially commenced. The air was charged with a newfound sense of purpose, as each member contemplated their role in upholding the honor of their house. Chapter 439, Slytherin's New Chaser. John had opted out of attending the Quidditch match, finding himself instead in the headmaster's office. He meticulously measured a teaspoon of dried blackroot powder, adding it to the cauldron before him. As he stirred, a pungent aroma filled the air. Blackroot has properties that counteract dark magic when ingested, Slughorn, standing beside him with his hands placed on his rotund waist, observed. The buttons on his waistcoat seemed to strain against his belly. A prudent choice, though its efficacy against blood curses remains uncertain. This potion isn't aimed at the blood curse, John clarified, shaking his head. It's designed to prevent other magical effects from being stripped away by the curse. Your caution is commendable, Slughorn remarked, a hint of admiration in his voice. Perhaps we could enhance it with rose thorns. As a master of potions, Slughorn's suggestions were invaluable, which was precisely why John had sought his expertise. Their collaboration was not only an opportunity for John to leverage Slughorn's vast knowledge, but also a chance to forge a bond with the seasoned professor. Slughorn, for his part, had no objections to dedicating his Saturday to experimentation, especially after John had gifted him a luxurious ice cream set, complete with Slughorn's favorite pineapple flavor. The headmaster enjoyed a cordial relationship with the portrait of former headmaster Black, and the two Slytherin leaders often shared moments of laughter and camaraderie, much to the chagrin of other former headmasters. Glancing at Slughorn's bookshelf, John noticed a complete series of Lockhart's works. Lockhart was always concocting bizarre schemes to garner attention at school, Slughorn reminisced. Yet, after leaving, he seemed to carve out a reputation as a brave wizard. He sighed, a tinge of regret in his voice. I failed to see his true potential back then. John remained stoic, knowing full well Lockhart's actual capabilities. Slughorn had once been misled by Lockhart's facade, but John knew better. Beyond the memory charm, Lockhart's magical proficiency was questionable at best. As their session concluded, Slughorn extended an invitation to John for a dinner at the Slug Club. John, however, declined, citing the need to review additional materials. He left the headmaster's office, bypassing the Star Club for the Quidditch pitch. Approaching the stadium, the sounds of an ongoing match reached his ears. 10 broomsticks darted across the field, but one rider, with golden hair flowing behind her, stood out. She maneuvered a Uninimbus 1000 with exceptional skill, her movements fluid and precise. Several competitors struggled to keep pace, with some crashing spectacularly. The girl emerged victorious, her triumph met with roaring applause. Removing her windproof glasses, she raised her hand in victory, her poise unmistakable. It's so cool, a young Slytherin boy exclaimed, captivated by her performance. Her golden hair was tied back in a ponytail, revealing a face that was both beautiful and determined. Daphne cheered from the stands. Astoria had advanced to the final selection, her performance leaving an impression on all who watched, including Malfoy, who was visibly agitated by the praise directed at her. Draco, stay calm, his friends urged, restraining him from confronting the admirer. Astoria's flying was not just about speed. Her technique and precision in scoring were unmatched. John watched from the sidelines, impressed by Astoria's prowess. Her appearance belied her agility and skill, making her a standout competitor and a promising addition to the Slytherin Quidditch team. Daphne couldn't help but beam with pride as she spoke of her sister's prowess. I had no idea Astoria was such an adept flyer. She's the fastest skier back in Finland. Her pride was palpable, overshadowing any question of why Astoria was there to try out in the first place. Her smile only broadened when Astoria secured her position as a Slytherin chaser. That's fantastic, Atto, Malfoy exclaimed, unable to contain his excitement at Astoria's success. He cheered so loudly that Astoria ran over and embraced him in a hug. In that moment, John instinctively reached out with his left hand, murmuring, calm down, as he gently restrained Daphne's wand-wielding hand. His forehead was beaded with sweat as he cautioned, even if it's Draco, he wouldn't survive the curse. That damned skunk boy, Daphne fumed, struggling against John's grip. I want to hang him from the astronomy tower. However, after a few seconds, her anger seemed to dissipate as if it were cotton candy dissolving in water, replaced by a different, softer emotion as she noticed the firm yet gentle hold on her hand. John felt Daphne's anger ebb away and slowly released his grip, ensuring she wouldn't act impulsively again. The Slytherin tryouts lasted 2 hours, culminating in Astoria's addition as a chaser, a cause for celebration. With Goyle and Crabbe maintaining their positions as beaters, the team saw significant changes, especially among the chasers, with several new substitutes joining the ranks. After the selection, Malfoy dismissed the team, showcasing the discipline that set Slytherin apart from the other houses. As they left the Quidditch pitch, John observed the new team members, unaware of the rigorous training that awaited them under Malfoy's tutelage. Unlike the other houses, Slytherin's advantage lay not just in the students' affluent backgrounds, but also in the team's sponsorship, allowing them access to superior equipment like the Nimbus 2001 brooms awaiting them in the locker room. Meanwhile, in the Gryffindor common room, the atmosphere was somber as Harry and Hermione tried to console Ron, who was disheartened after losing his spot to McLaggen due to stage fright. Despite Ron's attempts to brush it off, the defeat weighed heavily on him, prompting Harry to consider a rematch, though he knew it wouldn't be fair to the other players. McLaggen, Ron muttered with annoyance, feeling that McLaggen's arrogance would have been better suited to Slytherin. Harry shared Ron's dislike for McLaggen, who seemed to overshadow him as captain. In an effort to lift Ron's spirits, Hermione suggested visiting Hagrid, believing it would be a welcome distraction. Despite Ron's initial reluctance, Harry's encouragement swayed him, and the trio decided to seek out their old friend, hoping to find solace in his company. They made their way toward Hagrid's cabin, anticipation and a hint of anxiety mingling in the air. Outside the quaint hut, they were greeted by the sight of Buckbeak, the noble hippogriff who had narrowly escaped execution. With Sirius Black's daring escape to Hogwarts, Buckbeak had also found his way back to the safety of Hagrid's care. Harry, familiar with the proper etiquette when approaching a creature as proud as a hippogriff, stepped forward. He locked eyes with Buckbeak, offering a deep, respectful bow. After a tense moment, Buckbeak returned the gesture, signaling his acceptance and allowing Harry to draw nearer. Just as Harry reached out, his fingers brushing against the soft feathers of Buckbeak's neck, a figure appeared from behind the hut. It was Hagrid, his face lighting up with joy at the sight of his friends and the safe return of Buckbeak. However, this moment of happiness was short-lived. Suddenly, Hagrid's expression changed dramatically, his face paled, and he collapsed to the ground without warning. The abruptness of Hagrid's fall shocked everyone. Concerned, they rushed to his side, trying to understand what had caused this sudden turn of events. The atmosphere, once filled with the light-hearted reunion with Buckbeak, now turned tense and fraught with worry for Hagrid's well-being. Chapter 440, Changes in Glop. Hey! Don't mess with it! Hagrid's voice boomed across the grounds as he admonished the large, overweight black dog that followed him. His mood was sour, exacerbated by his frustration that the trio had not selected their classes. With a huff, he stormed into his hut and slammed the door shut behind him. Hermione looked disheartened by Hagrid's reaction. Sensing her distress, Harry reassured her, "Don't worry." He approached the hut with determination and knocked forcefully on the door. "Hagrid, open the door. We need to talk to you," he called out. When there was no response, Harry's tone took on a threatening edge. "If you don't open the door, we'll blow it open." He was already reaching for his wand when Hermione gasped in alarm. "Harry," she exclaimed, "you can't do that." "Why not?" Harry retorted, undeterred. "Stand back." To their surprise, the door swung open, revealing a visibly irate Hagrid. His beard seemed to bristle with anger. "You can't do this. I'm a teacher," he roared, the volume of his voice shaking the air. "Potter, how dare you threaten to blow up my door?" "I'm sorry, sir," Harry replied, the word sir laced with a deliberate emphasis. Hagrid's glare softened slightly, confusion replacing some of his anger. "Since when did you start calling me sir?" "Since when did you start calling me Potter?" Harry countered, leaving Hagrid momentarily speechless. "Fair enough," Hagrid grumbled, his anger subsiding somewhat. "Well, come in then, you ungrateful lot," he muttered under his breath, stepping aside to let them enter without closing the door behind them. The trio followed Hagrid inside and took seats around the large wooden table. Fang, the boarhound, scurried to a corner and returned with an iron basin, which he dropped at Hagrid's feet before dragging a large bag of dog food from under the table. "You greedy fellow, this is a year's worth of dog food." Hagrid exclaimed, yet he opened the bag and filled the basin for Fang, who began to eat with gusto. Noticing the trio's silent observation, Hagrid asked, "What's the matter? Feeling sorry for me? Lonely, perhaps?" "No," Harry quickly responded. "We just wanted to see you." "We've missed you," Hermione added sincerely. "Missed me, huh?" Hagrid snorted, his tone suddenly reminiscent of Malfoy's disdain. Despite his gruff exterior, he offered them rock cakes he had baked himself. "Hagrid, we really do want to continue with care of magical creatures," Hermione explained earnestly. "It's just that our schedules couldn't accommodate it." "Yeah, that's right," Hagrid replied, his tone softening. "No one can make it, except for John." "He's taken 13 subjects," Ron interjected. "He's hardly going to pass any of them." "But he attends my class every time," Hagrid said, his voice booming as he peeled a potato with unnecessary force. "That's different," Harry began, but his attention was diverted by the appearance of a large white grub. It was sticky and writhing, a sight that made Ron visibly uncomfortable. "They're giant grubs," Hagrid explained, his voice muffled. "I keep them to feed Aragog." His expression suddenly turned somber, and tears welled up in his eyes. "Hagrid?" Hermione asked, concerned. "Aragog, I think he's dying." "Ever since he was separated from his colony, his health has declined," Hagrid confessed, his voice breaking with emotion. The trio exchanged uneasy glances, recalling the colony that had been decimated. The thought of the giant spider, Aragog, stirred a mix of fear and confusion regarding Hagrid's affection for such creatures. "Can we do anything to help?" Hermione inquired, ignoring Ron's warning glance. "I've tried asking John, but there's nothing to be done. Aragog has no colony left, so I've had to relocate him," Hagrid explained, wiping away his tears. The trio decided it was best not to inquire further about Aragog's new location. However, Hagrid's mood lightened as he shared an unexpected development. "He's living near Glop now, and you'll never believe it, but Glop can already tie shoelaces." The atmosphere in the hut became less tense, as Hagrid's revelation about Glop offered a momentary distraction from the somber topic of Aragog's health. Hagrid proudly introduced his giant brother, prompting Ron to whisper to Harry and Hermione, "See, I told you so." Harry, puzzled, asked, "How does a giant manage to tie his shoelaces or even wear shoes?" Hagrid, with a hint of melancholy, replied, "John was his teacher. He crafted toys and shoes for Grop." Harry and Ron exchanged a look of disbelief. Hermione, addressing Hagrid's earlier comment about their busy schedules, said, "We don't need the time turner anymore. We destroyed the ministry's stockpile during our visit." Hagrid, glancing at his watch, eagerly invited them to meet Grop. Despite their initial reluctance, the trio couldn't resist Hagrid's warm invitation. As they ventured into the Forbidden Forest, Harry recalled their last visit and whispered to Hermione, "Do you remember that giant creature we encountered?" Hermione, whispering back, suggested it might have been one of the forest's magical inhabitants. Ron, feeling left out, wondered about their secretive conversation. Suddenly, Hagrid's excitement drew their attention to a Zuu, a large, vibrant creature causing chaos in the forest. As a massive furball hurtled towards them, the Zuu skillfully deflected it, saving the trio from a potential collision. Harry recognized the Zuu from their previous year's adventure in the forest. Hagrid reassured them of the Zuu's friendly nature, but the creature's close approach left them in awe and a bit frightened. Just then, another furball soared overhead, catching the Zuu's attention and leading it on a chase. Upon reaching Grop's cave, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Grop, wielding a wooden club, made the trio hesitate. Hagrid, oblivious to their apprehension, cheerfully introduced them. To their surprise, Grop was wearing shoes, albeit without complicated laces. Grop's attempt to say Hermione and Harry's names left them astonished. However, when it came to Ron, Grop struggled to recall his name, leaving Ron slightly disappointed. Hagrid proudly mentioned how Grop and John's studies had made the giant smarter. Curious about the wooden club, they didn't expect Grop to respond. Yet, Grop managed to mutter something about playing ball, demonstrating by hitting a furball with the club, sending it soaring over the Forbidden Forest. The trio was amazed. John had not only taught Grop to tie his shoes, but also to play. Their perception of Grop was forever changed by this revelation. In the cave, Hermione noticed a campfire and a blackboard. signs of Grop's ongoing education and adaptation to new activities. Hagrid announced his plans to teach Grop how to read, leaving Harry, Ron, and Hermione utterly astonished. The trio couldn't shake off their disbelief as they made their way back to the castle. Upon their return, Ron's mood darkened further as they approached the Great Hall. Cormac McLaggen was boasting loudly about how effortlessly he had clinched the position of goalkeeper, much to Ron's annoyance. Meanwhile, Draco Malfoy caught sight of Harry and seized the opportunity to taunt him. "I hear Gryffindor has a new goalkeeper. Finally made a smart decision, have you, Potter?" he sneered. Harry's response was immediate and physical as he lunged at Malfoy, unable to contain his anger. It was then, amidst the chaos, that Harry saw a figure he hadn't encountered in his nightmares for a long time: Snape. The sight of Snape brought an eerie silence to Harry's mind, momentarily distracting him from his altercation with Malfoy. Snape's presence always had a way of intensifying any situation, and Harry braced himself for what was to come.